Chapter 1185. Change this part of the universe. Looking at Yi Xian leaving, Baizong's expression was a little strange. He understood Yi Xian's meaning, but he knew it would be very difficult. After thinking for a long time, Baizong sighed. His heart was complicated. Yi Xian missed the opportunity to go to the sixth dimension, it had to be said, a little. In the distance, Yi Xian found the martial realm of the upper realms. This time, the upper realms lost more than 10 super experts. Yi Xian cupped his fists at Wu Jing. Thank you for coming to help, senior. Wu Jing smiled. You're welcome. Yi Xian hesitated, then said, why did senior come down to help? He naturally did not think that the other came down to help because of Yi Xian. Yi Xian did not have that kind of influence. Wu Jing smiled. Just treat it as a good karma, okay? Yi Xian smiled. Okay. Wu Jing looked at Yi Xian. You should go with them. Yi Xian smiled. What about the people around me? Wu Jing said softly, it is not a good thing to have too many fetters on the road of martial arts. Yi Xian smiled. It is not fetters, it is responsibility. Senior, when the army of spirit realm came, they did not leave me. How can I leave them? Wu Jing was silent. Yi Xian said again, Senior, when the fifth dimension comes, you should stay here and fight together. What do you think? Wu Jing smiled. Okay. It was impossible for them to go to the sixth dimension now. The sixth dimension gave face to Yi Xian, but it did not mean it would give face to them. And now, if they wanted to survive the fifth dimension, following Yi Xian was the best way out. Because Yi Xian had the book house, there was someone behind him. After chatting with Wu Jing for a while, Yi Xian turned and left. At this moment, Wu Zongxing appeared beside Yi Xian. Looking at the departing Yi Xian, Wu Zongxing suddenly said, he actually gave up the chance to go to the sixth dimension. Wu Jing calmly said, we should rejoice. Wu Zongxing looked at Wu Jing. What do you mean? Wu Jing said softly, if he were to leave selfishly, there would be no study house left in this universe. Shouldn't we be glad? Wu Zongxing remained silent. Yi Xian came to a large hall. At this moment, Mu and the others were all there. Everyone was looking at Yi Xian. Yi Xian looked at everyone and said with a smile, our biggest enemy now is the fifth dimension tribulation. Everyone fell silent. Fifth dimension tribulation. Although the crisis of spirit realm had been resolved, they still faced an even greater crisis, and that was the fifth dimension tribulation. Yi Xian continued, our overall strength is still not strong enough. Therefore, all of us have to become stronger. Mu suddenly said, what do you think? Yi Xian looked at Senior Sister Lu at the side. Senior Sister Lu, the Sword Sect senior brothers are much stronger than the other races. I want them to give us some pointers. What do you think? Senior Sister Lu nodded. Sure. Yi Xian turned to look at Baizong not far away. Senior Baizong, can the half-step self-release realm experts on your side also give us pointers? Baizong smiled. Of course. Yi Xian continued, some of our cultivation resources might be lacking. Baizong hesitated and then said, little friend Yi, don't worry. My Saint Hall has stored a lot over the years. However, these resources can only sustain the cultivation of a small number of people. Also, little friend Yi, you have to know Dao Yi's point. To nurture a return to realm break realm expert, the consumption is huge. This is when they have talent and potential. He was afraid that Yi Xian wanted to nurture a large number of return to realm break realm experts. That was too difficult. Yi Xian nodded. I know. However, at this moment, we can only do our best to strengthen our own people. Baizong hesitated to speak. Yi Xian said, Senior, you can tell me anything. Baizong said, we don't have enough cultivation resources. Yi Xian smiled and said, I intend to head to Spirit Realm. Head to Spirit Realm. Everyone here was shocked when they heard this. Baizong was slightly stunned as well. He glanced at Yi Xian and didn't speak further. Is this fellow going to take revenge? Yi Xian looked at Mu and said, Mu, come with me. Mu nodded and smiled. All right. After Yi Xian gave instructions for everything, he took Mu and Baizong with him to Spirit Realm. In the starry sky, Yi Xian flew on his sword. Beside him was Mu, while Baizang was behind them. Although he was stronger than Yi Xian and Amu, he didn't dare to underestimate Yi Xian. Not only because of the ponytail girl, but also because of Sixth Dimension's attitude towards Yi Xian. Sixth Dimension's attitude towards Yi Xian was something he couldn't imagine. Sixth Dimension's power was definitely not weaker than Spirit Realm, but Sixth Dimension was willing to make an exception for Yi Xian. Moreover, he was very humble in front of Yi Xian. This was definitely not normal. There was only one explanation for Sixth Dimension to be so humble. Sixth Dimension couldn't afford to offend Yi Xian. Every time he thought of this, his heart was filled with bitterness. What kind of monster did they offend? Fortunately, he was relatively lucky because he was still alive, while Guansheng and Immemorial Yuan were completely gone. When he thought of this, he couldn't help but think of something his master had once said to him. People should be timid when it was time to be timid. Most of the time, timidity wasn't cowardice, but great wisdom. At this time, Yi Xian suddenly said from afar, "Senior Baizang, previously your plan was to kill me, seize the study house, and then plot against Sixth Dimension?" Baizang smiled embarrassedly. "That's what I thought at the time." Yi Xian said, "Why didn't you attack Sixth Dimension directly? After all, it would be easier that way." Baizang hesitated and then said, "At the time, we felt that you were easier to bully." Hearing this, Amu covered his mouth and laughed lightly. Yi Xian glanced at Baizang and shook his head. Actually, the other's thinking was not wrong. If it wasn't for the ponytail girl, his side definitely wouldn't be able to stop Spirit Realm. As if thinking of something, Yi Xian suddenly said, "Senior Ninth Floor, you should be able to come out now, right?" Ninth Floor said, "Yes." Yi Xian was slightly puzzled. "Then why don't you come out? Is it fun in the tower?" Ninth Floor said indifferently, "Why should I go out? I feel that it's pretty good here." Yi Xian was slightly puzzled. "But don't you want freedom?" Ninth Floor said, "I really wanted freedom before, but now I want to live. I feel that before the Fifth Dimension tribulation ends, staying by your side is the safest." Yi Xian's expression was slightly strange. "Senior, with your strength, it should be very easy to go to Sixth Dimension, right?" Ninth Floor suddenly said, "Am I very, very powerful in your heart?" Yi Xian nodded. Ninth Floor said, "Thank you for thinking so highly of me. Unfortunately, I'm not that powerful. To go to Sixth Dimension, you have to fulfill 3 conditions. First, you have to obtain the permission of this place's Tendo. Second, you have to pass through the barrier of the universe. This process is very dangerous. Third, you have to obtain the permission of Sixth Dimension. Let me tell you, kid, Sixth Dimension gives you face. But it doesn't mean that they will give face to others. Those fellows are very sensitive, and they really don't welcome experts from other places to go to their place." Yi Xian was silent. In fact, he understood the Sixth Dimension. Because the Sixth Dimension had its current order. If other experts went there, they might very well break that order. Not everyone was willing to abide by that order. As Baizang had said, if he had begged the ponytailed woman, he might have been able to bring people from the lower realm to Sixth Dimension. But what if he went to Sixth Dimension? Forcefully changing the order of Sixth Dimension? Then many years later, everyone would be done with the Sixth Dimension and continue to experience the Fifth Dimension tribulation? As long as the people of Fifth Dimension didn't change, the tribulation would always be there. Therefore he chose to change. Although it was very difficult, he had to do it. Ninth Floor suddenly said, "Kid, it's really a pity that you gave up on going up." Yi Xian smiled. "It's not a pity. I feel that this universe is quite good." Ninth Floor said, "You want to change?" Yi Xian smiled. "Can't I?" Ninth Floor was silent for a moment before saying, "I've discovered that you're slowly walking the path of profit." Yi Xian was somewhat puzzled. "Why do you say that?" Ninth Floor said, "Because Prophet wants to change." Yi Xian was silent. At this moment, he thought of the cause and effect that the ponytailed woman had mentioned. Could it be that his path was really arranged by someone else? Yi Xian shook his head and smiled. If it was before, he would definitely be bothered, even depressed, and then angry. But now, he wouldn't be angry at all. because he discovered that it was enough to do things with a clear conscience. If what he wanted to do was the will of heaven, then he would follow the will of heaven. If it was the will of man, then he would follow the will of man. So what? Boom. At this moment, a powerful aura suddenly swept out from Yi Xian's body. At the same time, a powerful sword intent surged out from Yi Xian's body like a tidal wave. Baizong was stunned. Ninth floor was stunned. Amu looked at Yi Xian in shock. Was he going to break through? Yi Xian was also a little dumbfounded. What was he doing? At this moment, Big Sister's voice suddenly sounded. Clear your mind. Clear your mind. Yi Xian was stunned. Soon he understood. If what he wanted to do was the will of heaven, then he would follow the will of heaven. If it was the will of man, then he would follow the will of man. In fact, this was not about following the will of heaven or man. It was about following the will of man. Following the will of man. If he wanted to do something, as long as it was what he wanted to do and he had a clear conscience, then so what if it was the will of heaven or man? Thinking of this, the corners of Yi Xian's mouth curled up slightly. He slowly closed his eyes. At this moment, the aura on his body grew stronger. Not only did his aura grow stronger, but his sword intent also skyrocketed. The starry sky within tens of thousands of zhang around him boiled at this moment. The momentum was extremely shocking. At the same time, the sword in Yi Xian's hand trembled violently as if it was excited. He was going to break through. Amu's eyes were filled with excitement. Yi Xian's breakthrough was definitely great news. In the distance, Baizong's expression was slightly solemn. There was cold sweat on his forehead. He could break through just by walking? Damn it, isn't this cheating? Baizong looked at Yi Xian. Why don't I just call him Young Master Yi in the future? P.S. I've been thinking of organizing an event recently. I want to invite some book friends for a meal and eat spicy soup. Chapter 1186. Somewhere in the starry sky, the fifth dimension Tendo was leisurely walking. Recently, she had been busy, because there were a lot of things to do. Moreover, the fifth dimension tribulation was coming. Originally, when the plain-dressed woman was in this cosmos, she was very idle. Because of her, many troublesome matters wouldn't appear. The plain-dressed woman had this kind of deterrence. But after she left, more and more troublesome matters appeared in this cosmos. To put it simply, she was currently very busy. At this time, the fifth dimension Tendo suddenly stopped. She opened her palm and gently swiped it in front of her. This swipe caused the space in front of her to become illusory, and within that illusory space, she could see countless threads. Karma threads. Not her karma threads, but Yi Xian's. Seeing these karma threads, the Tendo slightly frowned, because she discovered that not only were there more and more karma threads, but they were also becoming more and more solid. At this time, a voice came from beside her. Why didn't that woman directly cut off his karma threads? The Tendo softly said, if she did, he would die. Only he could make that woman put down her sword. The voice was somewhat puzzled. Why would he die? The Tendo said with a smile, this is like an ordinary person growing a tumor. Tell me, if he cut off the tumor, would he survive? No, if he forcibly cut it off, he would only die faster. The voice was silent. The Tendo said again, there is only one way to solve this problem, and that is himself. Only he can cut off or change the karma threads on his body. The voice asked, can he do it? The Tendo said with a smile, he can't. The voice. The Tendo said again, however, he can do it better. The voice was puzzled. What do you mean? The Tendo said with a smile, if the tumor can't be cut off, then why not coexist with it? What he is doing now is obeying the tumor and maintaining a state of equilibrium with it. Simply put, what he wants to do now is what the tumor wants to do. Therefore, not only will the tumor not kill him, it will also help him. At this point, the corners of her mouth curled up slightly. What an interesting little fellow. The voice suddenly said, what if one day, the two of them have a conflict? Tendo rolled his eyes. What's the point of thinking so much about the future? The voice said, the problem exists, he can't avoid it. The Tendo smiled and said, some problems can't be solved in a short time. The voice said, "You are so smart, can you help him deal with it?" The Tendo shrugged. "Big sister, don't you think too highly of me?" The voice said, "I think you are very powerful." Tendo blinked. "Is it very powerful?" The voice said, "Yes." Tendo laughed. "The karma on him is not something I can solve, but, speaking up to this point," she blinked. "However, we can follow his karmic line and change it for him." The voice was puzzled. "Change?" Tendo nodded and smiled. "For example, the tumor was originally growing on his head, but we can move it to his butt." The voice, Tendo laughed and walked away. Soon, she arrived at Tendo's pawnshop. Xiao Dao was still in the pawnshop. Seeing Tendo, Xiao Dao said in a deep voice, "They were here." "Diabolism family." Tendo nodded. "They were here." Xiao Dao looked at Tendo. "You blocked it for me?" Tendo smiled and said, "Yes." "Aren't you touched?" Xiao Dao shook her head. "You are looking for trouble for yourself." She was the only one who knew how terrifying her family was. Tendo blinked. "If I say that I caused a little trouble for your family, you won't mind, right?" Xiao Dao looked at Tendo. "Don't play with fire." Heavenly Dao smiled and said, "You, don't worry about me. I know your Diabolism family is very powerful, but they won't cause trouble for me for the time being." Xiao Dao frowned. "Why?" Tendo smiled. "Because they might cause trouble for others." Xiao Dao was puzzled. "What do you mean?" Tendo shook her head. "Nothing. I'm not here to talk to you about this. I want to tell you something." Xiao Dao looked at Tendo. "What is it?" Tendo blinked. "You have to promise me that you can't be angry." Xiao Dao said calmly, "Say it or not." Tendo quickly said, "Do you want to have a breakthrough in your bloodline?" Xiao Dao frowned. "What do you mean?" Tendo smiled. "I mean I have a way to make your bloodline breakthrough." Hearing this, the little Daoist could not help but clench her fists tightly. She looked at the heavenly Dao. "Do you know what you're saying?" Tendo nodded. "I know." Xiao Dao stared at Tendo. "In my Diabolism family, no one has been able to make a breakthrough in their bloodline for hundreds of thousands of years. Although I think I am very powerful, I don't have the confidence to break through the bloodline shackles and change the Diabolism family." Diabolism bloodline. In her world, the Diabolism family's bloodline was ranked second among all bloodlines. The Diabolism bloodline was incomparably overbearing. The reason why the Diabolism family could become a super overlord was because of this bloodline. This was because once a member of a demonic path family was born, especially a direct descendant of a demonic path family, they would forever possess the bloodline of the demonic path. Their cultivation would be dozens of times faster than others, and once they activated the power of their demonic path bloodline, they would far surpass an ordinary person. However, the Diabolism family's success was also due to their bloodline. This was because the Diabolism bloodline was too strong. For the descendants of the Diabolism family to break through the bloodline shackles was as difficult as ascending to the heavens. But at this time, when Tendo said she had a way to help her make a breakthrough, she naturally found it hard to believe. But she knew that this woman in front of her was quite reliable. Tendo earnestly said, "It's true." Xiao Dao said in a low voice, "What method?" Tendo blinked. "I'll say this first. You can't be angry." Xiao Dao looked at Tendo. "All right, I won't be angry." Tendo earnestly said, "Do you know what Yi Xian's bloodline is?" Xiao Dao nodded. "I know. His bloodline is no weaker than my Diabolism bloodline." Tendo sternly said, "My method is, if you and Yi Xian combine, your bloodline will definitely be able to break through." Don't hit me. I'm not finished yet." Hey, you said you won't be angry. You don't be like this. Isn't it just a nap? It's very simple." After a while, the entire endless underground city shook violently, as if there was a great earthquake. In the starry sky, Yi Xian's eyes were tightly closed. Around him, the sword intent and aura were still increasing wildly. And at this moment, the surrounding starry sky had gradually become illusory. Bai Tsang and Amu had already retreated to a distance. Looking at Yi Xian in the distance, Baizong was silent. He knew that Yi Xian's breakthrough was imminent. At this moment, Amu suddenly said, "Senior, will there be any trouble when we go to the spirit realm this time?" This was what she was worried about. Although the spirit realm had been defeated, but her intuition told her that this trip to the spirit realm might not be so peaceful. Baizong said softly, "It depends on what little friend Yi is going to do." Amu looked at Baizong. "Are there any super experts in the spirit realm?" Baizong nodded. "The banished deity island. There are 2 people there and they are very strong." The banished deity island. Amu nodded slightly. She was about to speak, but at this moment, Yi Xian in the distance suddenly opened his eyes. And at this moment, the sword intent and aura around him surged back into his body like a tide. Soon, the surrounding starry sky returned to normal. Yi Xian opened his palm, and the executing heaven sword appeared in his hand. At this moment, he was already at the peak of the 3rd tier of the mortal sword realm. The sword Dao realm could be said to have reached the limit of this universe, because no one in the 5th dimension had surpassed the 3rd tier. Not only his sword Dao realm, but his realm had also reached the ruler realm. Double breakthrough. This surprised him a little, because he did not expect that not only his sword Dao realm had a breakthrough, but his realm had also followed. At this time, Baizong suddenly smiled. "Congratulations, little friend." Yi Xian smiled and then said, "Senior Baizong, I know what the origin returning realm breaker realm is, but this half-step self-release." Baizong shook his head and smiled. Half-step self-release is actually equivalent to the limit of the origin returning realm breaker realm. Yi Xian was slightly puzzled. "What do you mean?" Baizong said solemnly, "The self-release realm is not within the Grand Dao. Half-step self-release is actually still within the Grand Dao, and has not walked out of the Grand Dao, not even taking half a step out. It can be said that half-step self-release realm is the limit of the origin returning realm breaker realm, and this limit is actually worlds apart from the true self-release realm." As he spoke, he paused, and then said, "Before, Guansheng and I thought that we could fight a self-release realm, but in reality, we were too arrogant. A true self-release realm expert is not something we can contend against. This difference in realm is really not something that can be made up for by any external object. That ponytail woman was at least a self-release realm, and in front of her, he did not even have the power to resist. Also, the other was just an avatar." Thinking about what Guansheng had said before about fighting a self-release realm expert, it was a great joke. In the distance, Yi Xian was silent. He had not thought that the difference between a half-step self-release realm expert and a self-release realm expert would be so great. Self-release? Yi Xian looked towards the depths of space. Escaping from the Grand Dao, not within the Grand Dao, how could one do that? He slightly regretted not asking the plain-dressed woman now. Moments later, Yi Xian gathered his thoughts. He looked at Baizong and Amu. "Let's go." Baizong nodded. Soon, the trio disappeared into the stars. A long time later, the trio arrived at Spirit Realm. Stepping into Spirit Realm, Baizong suddenly said, "Friend Yi, what is your goal in coming to Spirit Realm?" Yi Xian looked towards the horizon. "Very simple." Baizong looked at Yi Xian and waited for him to continue. Yi Xian was expressionless. "Those who obey me prosper, those who oppose me die." Baizong. Chapter 1187. As Yi Xian's voice fell, the battlefield suddenly became quiet. Baizong was silent. He had already guessed that Yi Xian did not come to play this time. Spirit Realm's sky was about to change. Baizong sighed softly. At this time, Yi Xian suddenly said, "Senior Baizong, please lead the way, Spirit of Dark Race." Spirit of Dark Race. Baizong nodded, "All right." Finishing, he took Yi Xian and Amu and disappeared into the horizon. Spirit World. At this time, Spirit World was lifeless. Ever since they were defeated in the 5th dimension, all Spirit of Dark Race experts lived in fear. That woman killed a half-step self-release realm expert with one spear. How could they fight? There was no way. If that woman came to Spirit of Dark Race, thinking of this, the Spirit of Dark Race experts could not help but feel fear. On this day, Guan Yin, who was in a room, suddenly opened her eyes. The next moment, she appeared in the sky above Spirit of Dark Race. At this time, all the Spirit of Dark Race experts looked up at the horizon. In the sky, 3 people stood. The one leading was Yi Xian. He came. Guan Yin looked at Yi Xian and did not speak. At this time, the Spirit of Dark Race experts had surrounded her. Yi Xian looked at Guan Yin. From now on, Amu will take over Spirit of Dark Race. Do you have any objections? Guan Yin was silent. Yi Xian suddenly slashed. Under this slash, Guan Yin's arm flew off, blood splattering. In the field, all the Spirit of Dark Race experts changed their expressions. A dozen origin returning realm experts were about to attack, but they were stopped by Guan Yin. Yi Xian looked at Guan Yin. I will ask one last time. Do you have any objections? Guan Yin shook her head. No objections. From now on, Spirit of Dark Race will listen to your orders. She knew that there were only 2 outcomes for Spirit of Dark Race. One was to be destroyed, or submit like Baitsong Holy Hall. But no, there was no chance. The person behind Yi Xian was too terrifying. It could be said that as long as they fought, the Spirit of 9 Yin would be exterminated. Yi Xian turned his head and looked at Amu. You stay here and help her deal with the Dark Yin race's matters. After you're done, let her bring the Dark Yin race's experts to the 5th dimension. Once you're there, you'll arrange everything. Amu nodded. All right. Yi Xian looked at Baitsong. Senior Baitsong, let's go to the ancient race. Baitsong glanced at Guan Yin in the distance and then said, leaving Miss Amu here. I'm afraid it's a little dangerous. Yi Xian turned to glance at Guan Yin. Would she dare? As soon as he finished speaking, he vanished on the spot with Baitsong. Guan Yin remained silent. The faces of the spirits of 9 dead in the surroundings were extremely ugly. Surrender. They had never imagined that the spirits of 9 Yin would actually submit to others one day. Was he willing? Naturally, he was unwilling. Some of the Spirit of 9 Yin experts suddenly gazed at Amu with hostile expressions. However, Amu's expression was very calm. Guan Yin turned around and glanced at the Spirit of 9 Yin experts. Stand down. The Spirit of 9 Yin experts were slightly hesitant. Guan Yin took a deep breath. Can all of you defeat that woman? That woman. The Spirit of 9 Yin experts fell silent, and it didn't take long for some of them to retreat. Guan Yin looked at Amu. High Priest Amu, come with me. Amu nodded. All right. As soon as he finished speaking, the 2 of them left. In the distant horizon, Yi Xian and Baitsong arrived at the ancient race. As soon as they arrived, a few dozen formidable auras enveloped them. Baitsong frowned slightly. He waved his right hand, and the auras were instantly dispersed. Meanwhile, a young man appeared in front of Yi Xian. Primordial Ming, the former young clan leader of the ancient race. Of course, he was now the clan leader of the ancient race. Behind Primordial Ming, there were a few dozen origin-breaking realm-returning realm experts. Primordial Ming looked at Yi Xian. I wonder if Brother Yi can let my ancient race off. Yi Xian nodded. Sure. Primordial Ming was slightly startled. What condition? Yi Xian looked at Primordial Ming. From now on, the ancient race will listen to my orders. Primordial Ming's expression turned ugly. Brother Yi, can you change the condition? Yi Xian suddenly slashed with his sword. Before Primordial Ming could react, one of his arms was chopped off. The ancient race experts were shocked, but no one dared to make a move. Yi Xian looked at Primordial Ming. Am I discussing with you? Primordial Ming was silent. At this moment, Baitsong suddenly said, Does the ancient race want to be exterminated? Primordial Ming looked at Yi Xian. Brother Yi, do you really want to fight to the death? Yi Xian suddenly stabbed with his sword. Boom! Primordial Ming's head flew off. Blood splattered. The expressions of the ancient race experts changed. Some of them were about to make a move when a voice rang out from below. Stop. Everyone looked in the direction of the voice. There, a man was walking over. At this moment, Baitsong's voice rang out in Yi Xian's mind. Primordial Yuan's son, Primordial Qing is an illegitimate child. His talent isn't any lower than Primordial Ming's, but because of his identity, he has always been suppressed. Primordial Qing walked in front of Yi Xian and bowed to Yi Xian. Then he turned to the ancient race experts. Has everyone forgotten about the death of the clan leader? The death of the clan leader. The expressions of the primordial race experts turned slightly unsightly when they heard this. The clan leader had been stabbed to death with a single spear. Primordial Qing gazed at Yi Xian. Yi Xian said, "Can you convince the ancient race?" Primordial Qing shook his head. "I can't." Yi Xian said, "Who do you think deserves to die?" Primordial Qing pointed at an old man nearby. He's the clan leader's younger brother, and he has the highest prestige. The old man's eyes narrowed slightly, and he stared fixedly at Primordial Qing with undisguised killing intent in his eyes. Yi Xian suddenly said, "Kill him." Bai Tsong vanished on the spot. The old man's expression changed drastically. Everyone attacked together. As soon as he finished speaking, he smashed his fist forward. However, he'd only just punched forward when his head was blasted apart by a powerful force. There was a huge gap between a Returnance Realm expert and a half-step self-release realm expert. The experts of the ancient race were stunned when they saw the old man being killed in an instant. Yi Xian looked up into the starry sky. He sensed a powerful aura. Half-step self-release realm. In truth, whether it was the Spirit-Yin race, the Holy Church, or the ancient race, they all had more than one half-step self-release realm expert. Yi Xian looked up into the horizon. "If you dare to attack, I will exterminate the ancient race. I will not even spare a chicken or dog." There was no response from the horizon. Yi Xian looked at Primordial Qing in front of him. "From now on, you are the ancient race patriarch. Who else do you think deserves to die?" Primordial Qing was silent for a moment. He shook his head. "No one." Yi Xian nodded. "Have your people prepare. Once they are ready, immediately head to the fifth dimension." Primordial Qing nodded. But Yi Xian looked up into the horizon and then left with Bai Tsong. On the battlefield, Primordial Qing looked at the distant Yi Xian. It was unknown what he was thinking. All around, all the ancient race experts were silent. In the distance, Bai Tsong suddenly said, "Little friend, Primordial Qing cannot convince the masses." Yi Xian nodded. "I know." Bai Tsong looked at Yi Xian. Yi Xian coldly smiled. "In truth, I hope that they will resist." Bai Tsong was puzzled. But Yi Xian looked up into the horizon. He lightly said, "This way I can kill them all." Bai Tsong. Yi Xian quickly walked into the distance. In truth, he wanted to exterminate the Spirit-Yin race and the ancient race. But with his current strength, he couldn't do so. And most importantly, if he wanted to change this universe, he needed people. Bai Tsong glanced at Yi Xian and then followed. After leaving the ancient race, Yi Xian had Bai Tsong bring him to the Holy Church. The Holy Church's headquarters was in the Holy City. The Holy City was extremely prosperous and there were many people in the city. On the streets, Yi Xian and Bai Tsong slowly walked. No one recognized Bai Tsong. Clearly, this guy didn't often appear in the eyes of ordinary people. Bai Tsong suddenly said, "Little friend Yi, can I bring the people of the Holy City to the fifth dimension?" Yi Xian looked at Bai Tsong. Bai Tsong smiled awkwardly. "I'm a little selfish. My cultivation is related to the power of faith. The people in the city are all my believers. If I bring them there, I can save them and I can continue cultivating." Yi Xian turned and looked around. He softly said, "Help me pass down my order. Tell the people of Spirit Realm that as long as they are willing, they can go to the fifth dimension. If I can resist the fifth dimension calamity, then everyone will live. If I can't, then everyone will die together. If they are not willing, I won't force them. But if they go to the fifth dimension, then they must follow the order that I, Yi Xian, set." Bai Tsong nodded. But Yi Xian suddenly said, "Can I visit the banished Immortal Island?" The banished Immortal Island. Bai Tsong's expression changed. He hurriedly shook his head. "Little friend Yi Xian, don't provoke those two grandpas. Those two are really unreasonable people." Yi Xian hesitated for a moment. Then he nodded. But hearing this, Bai Cong immediately relaxed. He was really afraid that Yi Xian would provoke those two women. Those two women were really crazy. After a moment, Bai Cong left. On the streets, Yi Xian slowly walked. Fifth dimension calamity. Right now, he had no enemies in the fifth dimension or the sixth dimension. However, this fifth dimension calamity was something he had to face. Right at this moment, Yi Xian suddenly turned around to look. There was a woman sitting not too far away on his right. The woman wore tight clothes, her hair was tied up high, and there was a wooden sword on her back. Moreover, there was a bowl of wine in front of her. Meanwhile, the woman suddenly picked up the bowl and drained it in one gulp. After that, she placed the bowl on the table, and then she turned around to look at Yi Xian. In the next moment, she suddenly pressed her fingers together and pointed at Yi Xian. Go! The wooden sword on her back suddenly flew out, and it tore through the sky and slashed directly at Yi Xian. Yi Xian's pupils constricted. He suddenly stomped his right foot on the ground, and his sword domain appeared. However, at the instant that the wooden sword entered his sword domain actually shattered on the spot. Yi Xian's expression changed greatly when he saw this scene. He held the executioner heaven sword in his hand and stabbed forward. This strike directly stabbed the wooden sword. Bang! Yi Xian instantly retreated explosively for over 10 kilometers, and he directly retreated into the mountains outside the city. Moreover, his entire body had even split apart. Especially his right hand, ghastly white bones could even be seen. Yi Xian was slightly dazed. Damn it! I just broke through, yet I'm getting beaten up? P.S. If you don't vote, then is there any meaning to the existence of votes? Chapter 1188. At this moment, Yi Xian was indeed dumbfounded. Who was this sword-wielding woman, swordsman? Moreover, she was wielding a wooden sword. Most importantly, his body was actually unable to absorb the other party's sword intent. His invincible sword physique actually failed at this moment. Yi Xian looked at the woman who was walking towards him. She had an oval face and a pair of phoenix eyebrows. Her eyes were calm, but they exuded a chill that made one shudder. Yi Xian looked at the woman. If I'm not wrong, you should be from the banished Immortal Island. The woman stopped in her tracks. At this moment, the wooden sword suddenly flew back to her and slowly flew along her body. The woman looked at Yi Xian and was about to attack when Yi Xian suddenly said, "You should have a reason for wanting to kill me, right?" At this moment, his physical body was healing itself. However, that sword earlier could be said to have severely injured him, so he needed some time. The woman took a wine gourd from her waist and took a gulp before saying, "Someone paid me a high price to take your head." Yi Xian hurriedly said, "No matter what the other party paid, I'll pay double." The woman put down the wine gourd and looked at Yi Xian with a raised eyebrow. "Double?" Yi Xian nodded. "Double." The woman shook her head. "I'm a person with principles." Yi Xian raised his palm. 5 times. 5 times. The woman's eyes lit up. "We can negotiate." Yi Xian. The woman opened her palm and in her palm was a wisp of deep purple qi. "The other party gave me this to take your life and then take something from you." Purple qi. Yi Xian glanced at the purple qi and a trace of surprise flashed in his eyes. That purple qi was so pure. The woman looked at Yi Xian. "Do you have this?" Yi Xian looked at the woman. "Do you need this?" The woman nodded. "Yes." With that, she took out the wine gourd and took a gulp. "How bold." After drinking, the woman looked at Yi Xian. "Do you have it?" Yi Xian nodded. The woman took a step forward and arrived in front of Yi Xian. The woman looked at Yi Xian. "He gave me 100 strands of this purple gas." Yi Xian opened his palm. There was a ball of purple gas in his hand. If it was counted by strands, there were at least 1,000 of them. His purple energy was even purer than the purple energy in the woman's hand. Seeing that Yi Xian had so much violet qi in his hand, the wooden sword flying beside the woman suddenly stopped. She looked at Yi Xian and said, "So much?" Yi Xian smiled and said, "Yes, they're all yours." The woman said, "Just give me 500. Yi Xian shook his head. "Take the extra as a gift from me." The woman looked at Yixian. But Yixian smiled and said, I'll treat it as a friend. What do you think? Friends. The woman fell silent. Yixian looked at the woman and was secretly on guard. This woman's strength was much higher than Baizong's. He didn't dare to be careless. The woman suddenly retracted the purple gas. She looked at Yixian and said, More? Yixian didn't say anything else and took out another 1,000 strands of purple gas for the woman. The woman didn't refuse. She retracted the purple gas and said, The one who asked me to kill you is from the 6th dimension. As for who it is, I don't know. The 6th dimension. Yixian narrowed his eyes. Who is it? It shouldn't be the Union Hall. Yixian's expression sank. He suddenly realized that the Union Hall couldn't represent the entire 6th dimension. Just because the Union Hall didn't cause trouble for him didn't mean that the other powers wouldn't. Yixian looked up at the starry sky above him. Originally, he thought that the 5th dimension and the 6th dimension had no opponents. But now, it seemed that it wasn't the case. The woman suddenly said, The other party is very strong. Yixian looked at the woman and asked, Is he still here? The woman nodded. Yes. Yixian suddenly said, You really need the purple gas? The woman looked at Yixian and said, Yes. Yixian thought for a moment and said, I'll hire you to be my bodyguard. What do you think? The woman said, It's expensive. Yixian hesitated for a moment and said, Then can it be cheaper? The woman thought for a moment and said, 300 strands of purple gas a day. Yixian said, That's fine. The woman said, I want to go to a place first. As she spoke, she glanced at Yixian and said, Are you coming with me? Yixian hesitated for a moment and asked, Where? The woman said, Banished Immortal Island. Banished Immortal Island. Yixian glanced at the woman. Sure enough, it was as he'd guessed. She was from Banished Immortal Island. The woman asked again, Are you going? Yixian said, What do you want me to do? The woman said, I might need your help. Yixian nodded. I'm going. The woman said, Let's go. As soon as she finished speaking, she directly flew up onto her sword. Yixian laughed bitterly. This fellow really acts swiftly and decisively. Meanwhile, Baizong appeared in front of Yixian. Baizong glanced at the ray of light in the distance and said softly, Young brother Yi, why has she come looking for trouble with you? Yixian said, Someone in the 6th dimension asked her to kill me. The 6th dimension? Baizong frowned. Who is it? Yixian shook his head. I don't know. However, I'll investigate it. Baizong nodded. Looks like there are still some people in the upper dimension who haven't given up, and they want to seize your study. Yixian looked at Baizong. Senior, I'll leave the matters here to you. I'm going to Banished Immortal Island. Baizong hesitated for a moment and said, It's dangerous. Yixian smiled and said, It's fine. As soon as he finished speaking, he flew up onto his sword and disappeared into the horizon in the blink of an eye. Baizong looked at the horizon and shook his head. Are the people in the upper dimension stupid? Do you think you can touch young Master Yi? A bunch of retards. As soon as he finished speaking, he turned around and left. At the end of the horizon, Yixian and the woman flew on their sword. The woman liked to drink. She had drunk a lot along the way, and her body reeked of alcohol. Yixian glanced at the woman. How should I address you, senior? The woman put down the wine gourd. Agio. Agio. Yixian's expression was a little strange. No wonder you like to drink. The woman turned around and glanced at Yixian. You're quite strong. At this realm, you can withstand my sword without getting injured. In the entire spirit realm, only that girl from the spirit clan can barely do that. Guanyin. Yixian asked, Do you know Miss Guanyin, senior? The woman said casually, I met her by chance and gave her a few pointers. Yixian's eyelids twitched. Fortunately, she only gave her a few pointers and didn't take her as a disciple. Otherwise, he would be in big trouble. He finally realized that the woman's strength far surpassed that of Guansheng and Baizong. A swordsman of the same level would usually be more powerful than a swordsman of the same level. The woman asked again, You've comprehended domain? Yi Xian nodded. The woman said, "There's a big problem with your domain." Hearing this, Yi Xian was delighted and hurriedly asked, "What problem?" The woman picked up the wine gourd at her waist and took a big gulp. Then she said, "Your domain is too weak. Without a strong sword intent and sword cognition to support it, this kind of domain is like grass floating on water. It's too weak and will scatter easily." Yi Xian hesitated and then asked, "Sword cognition?" The woman looked at Yi Xian. "Didn't your master teach you?" Yi Xian blinked and then he shook his head. "She only pointed out a single path for me, and then she asked me to figure out the rest on my own." The woman spoke softly, "No wonder." As she spoke, she hung the wine gourd at her waist and said, "Sword cognition is your faith in the sword Dao. Sword cognition is above sword intent, and once intent attains the limit, it's thought. It's a form of advancement of sword intent. One thought, one sword, one thought, 10,000 thoughts, 10,000 swords." Sword cognition? Yi Xian fell silent. At this moment, he'd suddenly noticed a new world in the sword Dao. Sword cognition? In the distance, Jiao didn't speak any further, and she continued drinking from her wine gourd. Yi Xian hurriedly walked over to Jiao, smiled embarrassedly, and then said, "Senior Jiao, sword cognition is above sword intent. Then how do I achieve one sword with one thought?" Jiao gazed at Yi Xian. "What's your faith in the sword Dao?" Yi Xian fell silent. Faith in the sword Dao? Yi Xian didn't think for long. Protect. He wanted to use his sword to protect his sister, Yi Ling, and protect everyone around him. Jiao said softly, "Will of protection? Then your sword is the sword of protection. The stronger your sword Dao faith is, the stronger your sword cognition will be." As she spoke, she looked at Yi Xian. "The sword is strong because of the person, and the person is strong because of his thoughts." Yi Xian hurriedly asked, "How do I do it?" Jiao pondered for a moment, and then said, "Use will as a sword." Yi Xian asked again, "How do I use will as a sword?" Jiao looked at Yi Xian. "If you ask that, there's no way we can continue this conversation." Yi Xian was speechless. Jiao continued, "How to use will as a sword depends on you. If you can comprehend it, you can succeed. If you can't, it's meaningless no matter what others say." Yi Xian looked at the wooden sword behind Jiao. "Is Senior Jiao's sword an ordinary wooden sword?" Jiao nodded, "Yes." Wooden sword. Yi Xian fell silent. The other party had used a wooden sword to break his sword domain and body. Sword cognition. Yi Xian took a deep breath. The path of sword Dao was much further than he had imagined. The woman in front of him was a true mortal sword. An ordinary sword was in her hands, but it was comparable to a divine weapon. As for the plain-dressed woman, her realm was definitely higher than the woman in front of him. Then there was a problem. What level had the plain-dressed woman reached? It wasn't entirely a good thing to have an overly powerful sister. Yi Xian shook his head and smiled bitterly. He looked at the executing heaven sword in his hand. Sword cognition. How could he transform his sword Dao faith into a sword? Yi Xian fell into deep thought. As for Jiao, she didn't disturb Yi Xian and only cared about drinking. Along the way, Yi Xian was puzzled and had a headache. He wanted to ask the woman in front of him, but he knew that there wouldn't be an answer. Swordsman was like that. If he could comprehend it, it was fine. If he couldn't, it was useless to say anything else. At this moment, Jiao suddenly said, "We've arrived." Yi Xian looked into the distance and saw an island at the end of his vision. Banished Immortal Island. Jiao led Yi Xian to land on the island. When they passed by a certain place, Yi Xian saw a statue. When he saw the statue, he was stunned. He knew this statue. The statue was of a man wearing a cloud-white robe with a sword hanging from his waist. One of the owners of the 3 swords at the top of the pagoda. At this moment, Yi Xian was dumbfounded. Chapter 1189. One of the owners of the sword at the top of the pagoda. Yi Xian turned around to look at Jiao. "Senior Jiao, who's that?" Jiao gazed at the statue and said softly, "The founding ancestor of Immortal Banished Island." the founding ancestor of Immortal banished island. Yixian fell silent. Audiobook suddenly said, "You seem to know the founding ancestor." Yixian hesitated for a moment and said, "To tell you the truth, I'm an inheritor of your founding ancestor." Audiobook almost spat out the wine she'd just drunk. Yixian gazed at Audiobook and felt slightly innocent. "I'm serious." Audiobook blinked. "Do you have proof?" Yixian said seriously, "Yes." As soon as he finished speaking, he opened his palm, and a sword appeared in his hand. It was the swordsman's sword. Audiobook's expression instantly changed when she saw the sword in Yixian's hand. Yixian gazed at Audiobook. "I wasn't lying, right?" Audiobook gazed at Yixian. "Where did you get this sword?" Yixian said seriously, "Master gave it to me." Audiobook's expression was slightly strange. She picked up the wine gourd at her waist and took a huge gulp. At this moment, her mind was in a mess. This fellow actually has the founding ancestor's sword. What the heck? He even called the founding ancestor master. Then what should I call him? Yixian suddenly said, "According to seniority, I should call you senior sister." Senior sister. Audiobook gazed at Yixian and hurriedly nodded. "Call me senior sister." Yixian hurriedly bowed respectfully. "Greetings, senior sister." Audiobook suddenly asked, "How did you know the founding ancestor?" Yixian hesitated for a moment and said, "A very long time ago, I met his clone. He noticed that my physique was extraordinary and my natural talent was extraordinary, so he took me as his disciple." Audiobook sized up Yixian and said, "That's it." Yixian nodded. Audiobook gazed at the sword in Yixian's hand. She fell silent for a short moment before she said, "I'm quite confused right now. Let me have some wine to calm myself down." After saying that, she picked up the gourd at her waist and gulped it down. Yixian was speechless. A moment later, Audiobook turned to look at the statue. She drank a mouthful of wine and said softly, "There's actually one more junior brother. But my banished Immortal island can only have 2 people. What should we do?" Yixian quickly asked, "Why are there only 2 people?" Audiobook looked at Yixian. "Because it has always been 2 people." Yixian said seriously, "It doesn't matter if there's one more person, right?" Audiobook thought for a moment and said, "But there have always been only 2 people." Yixian's expression turned bitter. "Then are you going to kick me out?" With that, he turned to look at the statue and suddenly burst into tears. "Master, disciple's life is bitter. First I was chased by the spirit realm, then by the 6th dimension. Now that I've met you, I thought I've found someone to rely on, but senior sister wants to kick me out of the sect. My life is so bitter." Audiobook suddenly said softly, "I didn't say I'm going to kick you out." Yixian quickly looked at Audiobook. Audiobook hesitated for a moment and said, "But there have always been only 2 people on the island." Yixian suddenly burst into tears. "Master, I'm so miserable. I'm so miserable." Audiobook was dumbfounded. After a moment, she took out the gourd and gulped down a mouthful of wine. After that, she said, "This junior brother is quite scary." Seeing that Yixian was still crying miserably, Audiobook suddenly said, "You stay." Yixian hurriedly stopped. He looked at Audiobook and chuckled. "Thank you, senior sister." Audiobook was speechless. Yixian put away his sword and said, "Senior sister, don't you have something to do? Let's do it first." Audiobook nodded. "I almost forgot about it." As soon as she finished speaking, she turned around and left. Yixian hurriedly followed her. In next to no time, Audiobook led Yixian to a bamboo house. Yixian noticed that there were numerous bamboo swords placed in the courtyard. Audiobook walked into the bamboo house while Yixian followed. Yixian saw a little fellow in the bamboo house. The little fellow was completely snow white, shaped like a rabbit, and had a very weak aura. Audiobook walked over to the little fellow, opened her palm, and then countless strands of violet energy appeared in front of the little fellow. The little fellow instantly opened her eyes when she sensed the violet energy, and then she gazed at Audiobook. Audiobook said, "Inhale." The little fellow blinked, and then she sniffed lightly. In next to no time, the violet energy was inhaled by her nose. Yixian suddenly asked, "Senior sister, is this a spirit?" "Senior sister." Audiobook was slightly stunned. Obviously, she wasn't quite used to this new junior brother. However, she didn't refuse and nodded. "It's a spirit vein, the spirit vein of the banished Immortal Island." Yixian said softly, "Why is it so weak?" Audiobook said, "After Guansheng and the other idiots swallowed the spirit of the spirit realm, the other spirits were also affected. Now, the spirit chi of the spirit realm is disappearing at an extremely fast speed. Many spirits are affected." At this moment, Yixian thought of Tendo. If something happened to Tendo, the fifth dimension would probably be greatly affected. In a short while, the spirit absorbed all the violet energy. After absorbing the violet energy, her condition was clearly much better, but she was still somewhat weak. The spirit raised her head and looked at Audiobook pitifully. Audiobook looked at Yixian. When Yixian walked in front of the spirit was clearly very vigilant and hurriedly shrank back. Yixian smiled awkwardly. "I'm a good person." The spirit looked at Yixian with a vigilant expression. Yixian opened his palm, and a lot of violet energy appeared in his hand. He handed the violet energy to the spirit. When the spirit saw the violet energy, her eyes instantly lit up. However, she seemed to be afraid of Yixian and did not dare to approach. Yixian placed the violet energy in front of the spirit and retracted his hand. The spirit hurriedly pounced over and frantically absorbed the violet energy. Yixian looked at Audiobook. "Senior sister, why didn't you stop Guansheng and the others from doing such inhumane things?" Audiobook said calmly, "I was in seclusion. When I came out, they were already dead." As she spoke, she looked at Yixian. "I heard that they went to find you and were killed by you." Yixian smiled awkwardly. "I didn't kill them." Audiobook said, "You have great karma on you. It's a troublesome matter." Yixian said seriously, "Senior sister, are you able to see the karma on me?" Audiobook glanced at Yixian and said, "Yes." Yixian was moved. This cheap senior sister in front of him was stronger than he had imagined. Audiobook suddenly said, "Why did the sixth dimension want to kill you?" Yixian said in a low voice, "Because they wanted to snatch my study room." Audiobook frowned slightly. "Study room?" Yixian nodded. "The spirit realm wanted to snatch my study room as well." Audiobook said, "Take a look." Yixian nodded. He opened his palm and the study room appeared in his hand. A strange glint flashed in Audiobook's eyes when she saw the study room in Yixian's hand. Yixian asked, "What's wrong?" Audiobook said softly, "This item is extraordinary. Keep it well." Yixian said in a low voice, "But some people from the sixth dimension want to snatch it." Audiobook said, "Kill." Yixian was speechless. At that moment, the spirit absorbed all the purple gas. Then it looked at Yixian. There was no longer any wariness in its eyes. On the contrary, there was a hint of flattery. Yixian chuckled before he took out 100 wisps of purple gas and handed them to the spirit. The spirit hurriedly crawled in front of Yixian and began absorbing. After absorbing the purple gas, the spirit's aura became stronger and stronger. Yixian looked at Audiobook. "Senior sister, is the person from the sixth dimension still here when he came down to kill me?" Audiobook said, "Stay here. I'll go take a look." With that said, she turned around and disappeared. The sixth dimension. Yixian looked at the sword beam in the distant sky and was puzzled. What faction wanted his study room? Yixian turned to look at the spirit. It had already finished devouring the purple gas and was looking at him with a fawning look. Yixian said, "Do you still want it?" The spirit nodded vigorously like a chick pecking at rice. Yixian spread out his hands. "No more." The spirit blinked and then hurried to rub against Yixian gently, as if trying to please him. At that moment, Xiaoling suddenly appeared beside Yixian. She picked up the spirit and threw it to the side, causing it to roll. Xiaoling looked at the dumbfounded spirit in the distance and said calmly, "Do you have a problem?" The spirit blinked and looked at Yixian. Xiaoling blocked its line of sight. "Do you want the purple gas?" The spirit nodded. Xiaoling suddenly said angrily, Do you know that you eat the purple gas as if it's rice? Yi Xian finally understood. Xiao Ling, felt that the spirit had eaten too much purple gas. The spirit blinked innocently. Yi Ling suddenly walked in front of it and grabbed it. You can eat the purple gas, but you have to work. With that said, she brought the spirit into the prison pagoda. Yi Xian had a strange expression. Xiao Ling, seemed to have forgotten that the spirit didn't belong to her. Yi Xian didn't think too much about it. He sat down cross-legged and started to comprehend. Sword perception. What he wanted to do the most now was to comprehend sword perception and allow his sword Dao to reach a higher level. In a certain part of the starry sky, a ray of sword light streaked past. In next to no time, a woman appeared in the starry sky. It was Ajiu. Ajiu glanced at her surroundings. Meanwhile, a black shadow suddenly appeared not far in front of her. The black shadow said in a hoarse voice, "Your actions are very shameful to me." Ajiu looked at the black shadow. "Who are you?" The black shadow said, "What exactly made you go back on your word?" Ajiu drank a mouthful of wine and said, "Money." The black shadow was slightly stunned. Right at this moment, Ajiu suddenly stabbed out with her sword. One thought, one sword. This sword strike was swift to the limit. However, it stabbed empty air, and the black shadow had suddenly appeared over 1 kilometer away. Ajiu looked at the black shadow. Meanwhile, the black shadow gradually became illusory. "You'll regret this." As soon as he finished speaking, he vanished completely. Ajiu raised her head to glance at the starry sky, and then she turned around and left. Around 15 minutes after Ajiu left, the black shadow from before appeared once more. A voice suddenly resounded by the black shadow's side. "You can't expose your identity while moving about in this world. Understand?" The black shadow nodded. "Understood." Now, regardless of whether it was the 5th or 6th dimension, not a single power dared to go head-on against Yi Xian. However, they could play dirty. Within the bamboo house, Yi Xian sat cross-legged on the ground, and he was still comprehending. Right at this moment, his expression changed drastically. At the instant he opened his eyes, a destructive force blasted against the bamboo house. P.S. The editor drank a little today, and then he talked to me for a long time. He said a lot of things from the bottom of his heart. He said, "Green Phoenix, you can clearly rely on your looks to make a living, so why write books?" I'm actually speechless. Yes. I can clearly rely on my looks to make a living, so why write books? Chapter 1190. Bang. The bamboo house rumbled and collapsed. Yi Xian was naturally still alive. He'd retreated 300 m away, and there was a woman standing not too far away from him. The woman wore a red dress, her lips were red as if they'd been stained with blood, and she carried a large saber on her shoulder. At this moment, she was sizing up Yi Xian with a curious gaze. Yi Xian's heart shook when he saw the woman. She was probably that woman from the Immortal Banish Island who wielded a saber. Meanwhile, the woman suddenly said, "Who are you?" Yi Xian gazed at her. "I've never heard of you. Why are you at the wine bamboo house?" The woman frowned slightly. "I've never heard of you. Why are you at the wine bamboo house?" Yi Xian was about to speak when the woman suddenly said, "Forget it. That isn't important." As soon as she finished speaking, she suddenly swung her saber. The space in front of Yi Xian split apart. Yi Xian's expression changed drastically, and he hurriedly raised his sword to block it. Bang! In an instant, he retreated explosively for over 10 kilometers, and he'd retreated to the surface of the ocean. A deep ravine had appeared on the surface of the ocean before him, and the ocean water had split apart and shot up over 1 kilometer into the air. Yi Xian had a solemn expression on his face. "She's really strong. My body will definitely be unable to endure it if she slashes me with her saber. Looks like I have to strengthen my body as well." A trace of surprise flashed through the woman's eyes. "You're still alive?" Yi Xian was speechless. The woman grinned. "One more time." As soon as she finished speaking, she suddenly drew her saber and slashed. This slash caused the space in front of Yi Xian and the woman to be obliterated inch by inch. It seemed like it could split the world apart, and it was extremely shocking. A trace of ferocity flashed through Yi Xian's eyes. He took a step forward, and 3 domains appeared at the same time. Sword domain, death domain, and blood domain. As soon as the 3 domains appeared, Yi Xian's face instantly turned pale. Meanwhile, the saber slashed directly into his 3 domains, causing Yi Xian to spit out a mouthful of blood essence. At the same time, his body roiled as if it was about to explode. Yi Xian couldn't care less. He took a step forward and slashed forward with the executing heaven sword in both hands. At this moment, he'd relied on 3 types of sword domains. Boom! As soon as Yi Xian's sword fell, a powerful force suddenly broke out in his 3 territories. Yi Xian was sent flying backward. He flew hundreds of feet away. When he had stopped, his body was torn apart. The space around him even turned illusory. Then it was annihilated. However, he blocked it. In the distance, the woman sized up Yi Xian. He blocked it again? As soon as she finished speaking, she took a step forward, and then she swung her saber. This time, it was very calm. It was like a gust of warm wind that blew through the surroundings, and it didn't cause any fluctuations of energy. Yi Xian's pupils constricted. He knew that even his 3 domains wouldn't be able to block it this time. Am I going to die here? If I die here, then what about Yi Ling? What about Amu? What about Xianxia and the others? What about Wen Xiu? And the woman in a plain dress? I promised to go look for her. I can't die here. Yi Xian suddenly roared furiously, and his strong will to live made him draw his sword and stab forward. A sword strike of 10,000 thoughts. As soon as he stabbed forward, the executing heaven sword in Yi Xian's hand instantly turned illusory. Meanwhile, the saber arrived before him. The sword and saber were very calm. Most importantly, the saber had stopped, and Yi Xian hadn't retreated. His sword had blocked the woman's attack. The woman gazed at Yi Xian from afar. Sword perception. As she spoke, she was about to attack again. Just then, a woman suddenly appeared in front of Yi Xian. It was Ajiu. Ajiu looked at Yi Xian. You've comprehended sword perception? Yi Xian blinked. I didn't know. He was also a little confused about the sword strike he had just executed. Looking at Yi Xian, Jiu's expression became a little odd. Before this, she was sure that Yi Xian didn't know sword perception. But after she had left for a while, this guy had actually comprehended sword perception? What the hell? Ajiu took out her wine gourd and gulped down a few mouthfuls. She felt extremely unbalanced. Back then, she had spent a lot of effort to comprehend sword perception. But this guy had comprehended it just like that. He was crazy. Ajiu glanced at Yi Xian. Want to spar? At this moment, she wanted to beat someone up. Yi Xian hurriedly shook his head. Oh no. He had already sensed the hostility from the woman in front of him. At this moment, the woman in the distance suddenly said, Ajiu, who is he? Ajiu turned to look at the woman. Junior brother. The woman frowned. Junior brother? Ajiu, did you drink too much fake wine? Your master has been dead for a few king years. Where did you get your junior brother? Ajiu said indifferently, he's also your junior brother. The woman shook her head. I told you to quit drinking long ago, but you refused to listen. Now great. You've drunk so much that your brain has gone haywire. Ajiu looked at Yi Xian. Show her the sword. Yi Xian hesitated for a moment before taking out the sword. When she saw the sword, the woman was instantly stunned. In the next moment, she directly appeared in front of Yi Xian. Yi Xian's eyelids twitched. He was secretly vigilant and prepared to attack at any time. The woman looked at the sword in Yi Xian's hand and frowned. Why do you have the ancestral master's sword? Ajiu said, he's the ancestral master's disciple. The woman looked at Ajiu. He said that? Ajiu nodded. The woman sized up Ajiu. Which era was the ancestral master from? Which era was he from? You actually believe that he's the ancestral master's disciple? Ajiu hesitated for a moment before saying, he's very honest. He wouldn't lie. As she spoke, she even looked at Yi Xian. Right. Yi Xian was speechless. The woman shook her head. You really drank too much fake wine. As she spoke, she looked at Yi Xian. Tell me honestly, where did you get this sword from? Yi Xian said indifferently, this sword has a spirit too. You can ask her yourself. The woman was about to speak when the sword suddenly trembled violently and flew in front of Yi Xian. Yi Xian looked at the woman without saying a word. At that moment, the woman fell silent. Jiao hurriedly said, he's the ancestral master's disciple. The woman looked at Yi Xian. Is that so? Yi Xian said indifferently, if you believe me, I'll believe whatever I say. If you don't, it's useless no matter what I say, isn't it? The woman stared at Yi Xian without saying a word. Jiao said, he helped us heal the spirit. The woman said indifferently, Jiao, don't blame me for not warning you. This kid has a lot of karma. If you acknowledge him, you'll be swept into the vortex. Jiao frowned slightly. Situ, how can you do that? Are we not acknowledging him? The woman called Situ glanced at Jiao. This guy's gaze is erratic. One look and you can tell that he's not a good person. You'd better believe only a little of what he says. Otherwise, you won't even know how you died. Yi Xian was speechless. Jiao said indifferently, is there something you need from me? Situ said, you've made contact with people from the sixth dimension? Jiao nodded. Situ said, they asked you to kill this kid? Jiao looked at Situ. They also looked for you? Situ nodded. Jiao frowned slightly. These fellows, Situ suddenly said, those fellows won't let this go. Are you going to meddle in this matter? Jiao looked at Situ. Situ, do you really not care about being from the same sect? Situ said indifferently, he might not be the ancestral master's disciple. Jiao stared at Situ. Don't talk about this. The ancestral master's sword is in his hands. Furthermore, that sword doesn't repel him. This is already enough to explain everything. Situ looked at Jiao. Why are you so stubborn? Jiao was expressionless. Without the ancestral master, there would be no banished Immortal Island. Without banished Immortal Island, where would there be you, Situ? You might be afraid of the sixth dimension, but I'm not. With that said, she turned to look at Yi Xian. Let's go. Yi Xian nodded. Situ was so angry that her face turned red. Jiao, you big idiot. The karma on him is too great. If you acknowledge him, you won't have a good ending. Yi Xian suddenly stopped in his tracks and turned to look at Situ. Miss Situ, I have never thought of using senior sister Jiao to help me bear any burdens. Situ looked at Yi Xian. Kid, you are not the ancestral master's disciple. Your sword Dao is fundamentally different from his. Yi Xian asked in return, is senior sister Jiao's sword Dao the same as his? Situ looked at Yi Xian without saying a word. Yi Xian did not say anything else and turned to leave with Jiao. Situ was silent. In fact, she was also extremely puzzled. Why did this fellow have the ancestral master's sword? She could not figure it out. Yi Xian followed Jiao to the bamboo hut from before. However, the bamboo hut had already been reduced to rubble at that moment. Jiao's expression was cold. That damned woman. Yi Xian suddenly asked, Senior sister, doesn't she use a saber? Why is she from the same sect as us? Jiao looked at Yi Xian. Don't you know? The ancestral master used a saber too. Used a saber? Yi Xian's eyelids narrowed. That swordsman who was wearing a cloud-white robe also used a saber? Jiao looked at Yi Xian and asked, You don't know? Yi Xian said in a deep voice, When I met him, he only used a sword and not a saber. Jiao said softly, And in the records of our banished Immortal Island, he rarely used a sword. He basically used a saber. Yi Xian asked, He's a swordsman. Why would he use a saber? Jiao shook her head. I don't know about that. Yi Xian turned to look at the statue in the distance. Why did this fellow cultivate a saber instead of a sword? Did he think that cultivating a sword was meaningless? At that moment, Jiao suddenly asked, Have you already comprehended sword perception? Yi Xian said in a deep voice, I don't know. However, I did have a lot of thoughts in my mind when I attacked just now. Jiao thought for a short moment before she said, It was probably sword perception. If it wasn't for sword perception, then you wouldn't have been able to resist that strike of Situ's. However, you've only comprehended it and haven't fully grasped it. What you have to do now is calm down, comprehend it properly, and take complete control of it. Yi Xian nodded. All right. As soon as he finished speaking, he sat down cross-legged. In next to no time, his mind was filled with the scene of him attacking with his sword. Sword perception. Above sword intent was sword perception. It could be said that once he grasped sword perception, then his sword Dao would improve. At that time, it wouldn't just be his sword Dao, even his sword domain would become even stronger. Just like that, time passed slowly. Chapter 1191. Looking at Yi Xian, who was meditating, Jiao was silent for a moment before leaving. Soon she arrived at a seaside. At this time, Situ appeared next to her. Situ said, "You really want to meddle in his matters?" Jiao looked at the distant sea. "Situ, are you afraid?" Situ sneered. "Me? What have I been afraid of?" Jiao turned to look at Situ. "How long do you think this universe can survive?" Situ was silent. Jiao looked at the distant horizon and said, "The fifth dimension calamity is coming. It will be hard for the creatures of this universe to survive." Situ suddenly said, "With our strength, going to the sixth dimension is not a difficult matter." Jiao said indifferently, "I thought so too previously, but I suddenly realized that we underestimated the sixth dimension too much." Situ looked at Jiao. "You think we can't beat them?" Jiao smiled. "Situ, if the sixth dimension was really that weak, they would have been gone long ago. If we want to fight the sixth dimension, first, we have to face all the experts of the sixth dimension. When facing external enemies, they will definitely be united. Second, we have to face the barrier of the universe. Can you fight against the barrier while fighting against the sixth dimension experts?" Situ was silent. Jiao looked into the distance and whispered, "Moreover, I feel that this universe can be saved." Situ said, "Because of him?" Jiao nodded. Situ said, "With your strength, it is impossible for you not to know the karma of his body. If we are together with him, I'm afraid none of us will have a good ending." Jiao smiled. "You are afraid." Hearing this, Situ's pupils suddenly shrank. Fear was a great taboo for swordsmen and saber cultivators. Jiao said, "I know what you are worried about, but I feel that we can help him." Situ said, "Why?" Jiao looked at Situ. "When I went to the holy city, I found that he told Heavenly God Sect Master Baitsong to summon the people of Spirit Realm to the fifth dimension." Situ frowned. "He wants to save the people of Spirit Realm?" Jiao nodded. "Yes, he wants to resist the fifth dimension tribulation. And now, only he has the greatest hope of resisting the fifth dimension tribulation because he has the bookstore." Situ suddenly asked, "You also don't believe that he is Grandmaster's disciple, right?" Jiao looked at Situ. "What does it mean for Grandmaster's sword to be in his hands?" "This means that even if he isn't Martial Ancestor's disciple, he is someone Martial Ancestor has taken a liking to. Since that's the case, what does it matter if he's a disciple or not?" Situ was silent. Jiao continued, "No matter what, for the two of us, there are only two paths. The first is to fight our way up to the sixth dimension and become enemies with the entire sixth dimension. The second is to resist the fifth dimension tribulation and live well." Situ looked off into the distance and softly said, "But I feel like the karma on his body is even more terrifying than the fifth dimension tribulation." Jiao said, "The karma on him is huge and chaotic, but he's still alive." "Still alive?" Hearing this, Jiao's expression immediately changed. At this moment, she suddenly realized that this guy was still alive despite having so much karma on him. After a moment, Situ said solemnly, "He's not simple either." Jiao suddenly said, "What conditions did the sixth dimension give you?" Situ smiled and said, "They said that after killing him, they can bring me up to the sixth dimension. However, I don't believe them. Even if I, Situ, want to go to the sixth dimension, why would I need other people's charity? To be honest, I really want to fight our way up to the sixth dimension with you and see the experts of the sixth dimension." fight their way up to the sixth dimension? Ajiao looked at Xing. In the sky, she shook her head. The sixth dimension. She had never been to the sixth dimension, but she knew that place was definitely not weaker than the spirit realm. Previously, if the few major forces of the spirit realm had joined forces, the two of them might not have been able to defeat them, let alone the sixth dimension that had the barrier of the universe. Most importantly, all the experts of the spirit realm had joined forces to fight Yi Xian, and Yi Xian had won. At this moment, the sound of a sword suddenly came from afar. Ajiao turned her head and softly said, "He broke through." So fast. When she finished speaking, she had already disappeared from where she was. Ajiao also disappeared with her. In a certain empty space, Yi Xian opened his eyes. He stood up, opened his palm, and a sword appeared in his hand. It was a very ordinary sword. At this moment, Ajiao appeared in front of him. Yi Xian looked at Ajiao and stabbed out with his sword. Ajiao also stabbed out with her sword. Both swords were very calm, and both were silent. The moment the two swords touched, Yi Xian instantly retreated dozens of feet. However, his face was filled with excitement. If it was before, he would at least have to use all his strength to barely block Ajiao's sword. However, at this moment, he easily blocked it. Sword thought. One sword thought, one sword thought, one sword thought. Ajiao looked at Yi Xian and said, "Congratulations." Yi Xian smiled and said, "Thank you, senior sister, for your guidance." Ajiao shook her head and said, "It's your own high comprehension." Actually, she was extremely shocked by Yi Xian's comprehension as well. She hadn't expected that Yi Xian would actually be able to comprehend sword thought in such a short period of time. Yi Xian put his sword away and said, "Senior sister Ajiao, the spirit's injuries have basically recovered. I still have things to deal with, so I have to leave now." As soon as he finished speaking, he asked Xiaoling to summon the spirit. However, the spirit refused to come out no matter what, and it intended to follow Xiaoling. There were simply too many benefits to following Xiaoling. It wasn't just violet energy, there were all sorts of top-grade medicinal pills as well. Moreover, the spirit energy within the pagoda was much purer than the outside world. Yi Xian was quite speechless when he saw the spirit refuse to come out. That little fellow is addicted to violet energy. Meanwhile, Ajiao suddenly said, "Just let it follow you." Yi Xian was stunned, and then he said, "Senior sister, it's the spirit here." Ajiao gazed at Yi Xian and said, "The spirit region isn't suitable for cultivation anymore. Can I follow you there?" Yi Xian was overjoyed when he heard this, and he hurriedly said, "Of course." The strength of this person in front of him was not just for show. With her around, it would be very beneficial to the fifth dimension, and it would be even more beneficial to him. Ajiao nodded slightly. "All right." Yi Xian smiled and said, "I'm going to Hallowed City. Senior sister, are you coming with me?" Ajiao nodded. "Situ is coming as well." "Situ?" Yi Xian frowned. He didn't really like that woman. Ajiao said, "She won't cause trouble." Yi Xian thought for a moment and said, "All right." Ajiao nodded. "Let's go." As soon as she finished speaking, she turned around and flew up on her sword, and she vanished into the horizon in the blink of an eye. Yi Xian also disappeared into the horizon. After returning to Hallowed City, when Baizong saw Ajiao following Yi Xian, his expression instantly became extremely strange. And when he saw Yi Xian call Ajiao senior sister, his expression became even stranger. In this short period of time, exiled Immortal Island was on the same side as Yi Xian? Could Yi Xian be a child of the fifth dimension? Perhaps he was a child of the fifth dimension. In the Great Hall, Yi Xian looked at Baizong, who was muttering inwardly. "How are the spirits of Nine and the ancient race?" Baizong hurriedly said, "The experts of the two races have all moved to the fifth dimension. Only the ancient race encountered a small problem." Yi Xian frowned. "What problem?" Baizong said, "Immortal Qing still finds it hard to convince the masses. Some people of the ancient race do not accept him. At the beginning, there were people who stirred up trouble, but they were all suppressed by the Grand Elder of the ancient race family." Yi Xian said, "The other party is half-step self-defense?" Baizong nodded. Yes. Right now, the experts of the ancient race have all moved to the 5th dimension. Yi Xian nodded. What about the holy city? Baizong said, they have also moved to the 5th dimension. However, many forces of spirit realm are not willing to leave. They want to stay here. Yi Xian said softly, let them. You can tell them that if they want to go to the 5th dimension in the future, they can. However, I will say it again. If they go to the 5th dimension, they must obey the order of Yi Xian. Otherwise, don't blame me for being merciless. Baizong nodded. Understood. Yi Xian stood up. Then let's go. Baizong hesitated and then said, little friend Yi, if so many people go to the 5th dimension, there will be chaos. Yi Xian said coolly, kill whoever causes chaos. Baizong looked at Yi Xian. Yi Xian said softly, Senior Baizong, do you know what we will face next? Baizong said solemnly, the 5th dimension calamity. Yi Xian nodded. Surviving is the most important thing. Do you understand what I mean? Hearing this, Baizong's expression changed. He hurriedly said, understood. He knew that this was Yi Xian warning him not to play any tricks. Right now, the most important thing for the experts of the 5th dimension and spirit realm was to resist the 5th dimension calamity. Surviving was the most important thing. Yi Xian glanced at Baizong. Senior, go to your work. Baizong nodded. But after saying this, he retreated. Yi Xian looked at Jiao and said with a smile, Senior sister, let's go too. Jiao nodded. Then the two disappeared. More and more experts of spirit realm moved to the 5th dimension because they knew that the 5th dimension calamity was coming. However, there were still some forces that were unwilling to leave. They said that there was a 5th dimension calamity, but some people did not believe it. Because spirit realm had never experienced a 5th dimension calamity, they were skeptical about it. There were also some people who did not care at all because they had no concept of the 5th dimension calamity. They did not know what it meant. Moreover, spirit realm was still fine. And when some forces saw the ancient races and other forces moving to the 5th dimension, they followed suit and moved. After all, the spirit energy of spirit realm was not suitable for cultivation. Somewhere in the starry sky, Yi Xian and Jiao were flying on their swords. Yi Xian suddenly took out a golden sound transmission talisman. This was given to him by the 6th dimension's Li Chen. He could directly contact the 6th dimension through it. Yi Xian said a few words into the sound transmission talisman and then put it away. Jiao glanced at Yi Xian and did not say anything. 6th dimension, Union Hall. Li Chenfeng, who was cultivating in seclusion, suddenly opened his eyes. The space in front of him trembled slightly, and a moment later, his complexion greatly changed and he cursed, which idiot is targeting young Master Yi? Even if you want to die, don't drag down our 6th dimension. After saying this, he ran out of the house and went straight to the Wen Palace. P.S. There are very few monthly votes. Maybe my updates are not good enough. Chapter 1192. At this moment, Li Chenfeng was both shocked and furious. He was angry that 6th dimension still had people who dared to touch Yi Xian. He was afraid that 6th dimension would be implicated. Putting aside the invincible lady in the plain dress, even the lady with the spear that appeared in the lower realm was not something that the United Hall could handle. That person's clone had instantly killed a half-step self-release realm expert. He didn't know how many of these experts were behind Yi Xian. Touch Yi Xian? Wasn't this inviting disaster for the 6th dimension? Not long after, Li Chenfeng arrived at the entrance of the Wen Hall. Inside the Wen Hall sat a white-haired woman busying herself. She wore a black dress, and her features were picturesque. She was devastatingly beautiful. This woman was the Union Hall Master of the Hall of Letters, Wen Zhao. Although her strength wasn't at the peak of the 6th dimension, her influence was definitely at the peak. Most of the time, the martial arts hall served the Wen Hall. Li Chenfeng didn't dare to enter. He stood outside the door and respectfully bowed. Palace Master, young Master Yi from the lower realms has sent a letter. He said that an expert from the sixth dimension has gone to the lower realms to deal with him. He wants us to help investigate this matter. At this moment, Wen Zhaohua stopped and frowned. Sixth dimension? Li Chunfeng hurriedly nodded. Yes, young Master Yi sent a letter personally. It can't be fake. After a moment of silence, Wen Zhaohua said, those who have the strength to compete for the book house are none other than the Avici Hell sect, the Zen sect, the Southern Mountain Sword sect, the Northern Wilderness Barbarian Kingdom, and, when she spoke up to hear, she paused for a moment and said, ancient temples. An ancient temple. Hearing this, Li Chunfeng's expression suddenly changed. That was the only place that the Union Hall was extremely afraid of. It was also a place that all the powers in the sixth dimension feared. Until now, no one knew when it had appeared, and no one knew what was inside. All they knew was that it had always existed on the distant Divine Mountain. After a while, when Zhaohua suddenly said, the Avici Hell sect, the Zen sect, the Southern Mountain Sword sect, and the Northern Wilderness Barbarian Kingdom have no reason to look for Yi Xian, nor do they dare to. There is only one possibility, and that is this mysterious ancient temple. Li Chunfeng hesitated for a moment and said, why? When Zhaohua glanced at Li Chunfeng. Because the prophet came from this ancient temple. Li Chunfeng was dumbfounded. When Zhaohua said softly, this is not something we can handle. Send him a message and tell him to be careful and not to underestimate us. Li Chunfeng nodded and withdrew. Inside the hall, when Zhaohua's eyes were filled with worry. The ancient temple had not moved for tens of thousands of years. The most recent movement was the appearance of the prophet. The reason why she knew that she came from the ancient temple was that the prophet had stayed in the Hall of One for a period of time. He was an extraordinary person. After a moment of silence, when Zhaohua stood up and left. Not long after, she arrived at the lakeside. Next to the lakeside was a small pavilion. The sound of a zither could be heard coming from the pavilion. When Zhaohua arrived at the small pavilion. Inside the pavilion, a woman was playing the zither. This woman was the sixth dimension Tendo. When Zhaohua laughed. You seem to be very free. The sixth dimension Tendo stopped playing. She looked at Wen Zhaohua and said with a smile, Zhaohua, don't be so busy. Rest more. When Zhaohua shook her head. That woman seriously injured the sixth dimension. There are too many bad things happening. I have to be busy. That woman. Hearing this, the smile on the sixth dimension Tendo's face gradually disappeared. Back then, that woman had almost destroyed the sixth dimension with one sword strike. When Zhaohua suddenly said, let's not talk about her. This time, I came to find you because I have something to tell you. The sixth dimension Tendo looked at Wen Zhaohua. What is it? Wen Zhaohua said in a deep voice, in the lower realm, Yi Xian sent a message saying that a sixth dimension expert is targeting him. The sixth dimension Tendo frowned. Who? Wen Zhaohua's expression became somewhat serious. I think it should be the ancient temple. Other than that place, other forces should not be so stupid as to target Yi Xian. Ancient temple. The sixth dimension Tendo was silent. When Zhaohua looked at the sixth dimension Tendo. Do you know the origin of that place? The sixth dimension Tendo shook her head. I don't know. When Zhaohua frowned. Even you don't know? The sixth dimension Tendo said softly, when I existed, that place had already appeared. Hearing this, when Zhaohua's expression suddenly changed. And before the sixth dimension Tendo? The sixth dimension Tendo pressed her hands on the strings, her expression somewhat serious. If that ancient temple is really targeting him, then this matter is really a bit difficult to deal with. When Zhaohua nodded, the ancient temple was the only force that was not controlled by the Union Hall, and it was also the only force that the Union Hall did not dare to provoke. Other forces would more or less give some face to the Union Hall, but the ancient temple was different. The sixth dimension Tendo suddenly said, this is not something we can handle. Saying this, she looked at Wen Zhaohua. You have to check to see if it is the ancient temple. When Zhaohua nodded, I have already sent people to check. By the way, have you been to the ancient temple? The sixth dimension Tendo shook her head. I have not been there. When Zhaohua frowned slightly. Why? The sixth dimension Tendo said softly, "Danger! Danger!" when Zhaoruo was silent. The sixth dimension Tendo suddenly said, "For the fifth dimension, we will help if we can. If we can't help, then there is nothing we can do." When Zhaoruo looked at the sixth dimension Tendo and said with a smile, "If you devour the fifth dimension Tendo, you should become stronger, right?" The sixth dimension Tendo hurriedly shook her head. "I can't devour her. It is more like she devours me." When Zhaoruo was a little puzzled. "Why?" The sixth dimension Tendo was a little surprised. "Can't you feel how terrifying she is?" When Zhaoruo. The fifth dimension. Yi Xian returned to the void dimension. At this moment, countless experts gathered in the void dimension. They were all from spirit realm. It had to be said that the sudden appearance of so many experts was a little chaotic. This was because when Yi Xian was not around, no one could intimidate these people. However, when Yi Xian appeared, the void dimension instantly calmed down. Yi Xian. The experts of spirit realm could be said to be very wary of Yi Xian. After returning to the Wu clan, Yi Xian immediately went into seclusion. This was because the Dao laws had been gathered. What he needed to do now was to completely master all the Dao laws and let them return to their positions. Only then would he be able to unleash the true power of the prison pagoda. In the room, Big Sister looked at Yi Xian. She pointed with her finger. Here. As soon as she said that, the great Dao law suddenly appeared between Yi Xian's brows. Big Sister said softly, "You have almost mastered the great Dao law and the space Dao law, but you have not comprehended the essence of the dream Dao law. Let's start with the dream Dao law." Yi Xian nodded. But Big Sister said, "The core of the dream Dao law is to enter a dream. Enter your own dream, and also enter the dream of others. And this dream refers to an illusory world. That world is both real and fake, similar to the ability of the shattering void tear. In this dream, the real and fake are up to you to control." After saying that, she suddenly pointed between Yi Xian's brows. In an instant, Yi Xian's whole body trembled, and his surroundings became illusory. Big Sister looked at Yi Xian. "Are you in a dream or in reality?" Yi Xian directly used sword domain. Soon he looked at Big Sister. "In a dream." Big Sister shook her head. "You are wrong. We are in reality now." Yi Xian was stunned, and then said in a low voice, "Impossible, this can't be hidden from my sword domain." Big Sister said indifferently, "It can't be hidden from your sword domain, but it can be hidden from you. Your sword domain can distinguish between real and fake, but you can't." Yi Xian frowned slightly. "The sword domain is mine." Lian Qian suddenly said, "To put it simply, it's the transition between real and fake. When your sword domain detects the real and fake, Big Sister has already changed the dream. Whether it's real or fake, it's all up to you." When he heard this, Yi Xian understood. This was a little terrifying. Everyone suddenly said, "Let's begin now. If there's anything you don't understand, you can ask me directly." Yi Xian nodded. In the following time, he started to study the dream Dao madly, and under Big Sister's guidance, he quickly grasped the essence of the dream Dao law. Enter dream. It had to be said that it was very powerful. However, after studying these Dao laws, he realized that although the might of a single Dao law was powerful, it was limited. When all the Dao laws were used together, the might would be able to destroy the world. When he realized this, Yi Xian became even more excited. When Yi Xian was cultivating, a guest came to the Wu clan. The fifth dimension Tendo. When the fifth dimension Tendo arrived at the Wu clan, Amu hurriedly received her personally. She didn't dare to slack off in the slightest when dealing with this woman. In the city, the fifth dimension Tendo looked around and said with a smile, "He invited the experts of spirit realm here?" Amu nodded. "As long as spirit realm is willing, they can come." The fifth dimension Tendo smiled and didn't say anything. Amu glanced at the fifth dimension Tendo and said softly, "Is there something you need?" The fifth dimension Tendo shook her head. "No, I just came to take a look." As she said this, she looked into the distance. "He's in seclusion, right?" Amu nodded. The fifth dimension Tendo stopped and said with a smile, "Then I'll come another day." After saying this, she turned and left. As if she thought of something, she turned to look at Amu and said with a smile, "There's something." One day later, tell him to go to the Tendo pawn shop. Tell him to go. Amu hesitated and then nodded. But the Tendo waved her hand and then quickly disappeared into the distance. Looking at the Tendo leaving in the distance, Amu didn't say anything for a long time. After the Tendo left the shaman city, she came to a small city. Samsara city. The place where the prophet had disappeared. However, when she came to this city, she found that all the people in the city had disappeared. Not a single person. The Tendo looked around and said expressionlessly, "Interesting." After saying this, she gently turned her right hand. Time reversal. As her voice fell, the space in front of her suddenly became distorted. Soon, the scene in the city 4 hours ago appeared in the distorted space. At that time, there were still many people in the city. 4 hours ago, a man in black suddenly appeared in the city. When the man in black appeared in the city, he looked around and then waved his right hand. In an instant, all the people in the city disappeared without a sound. They were directly wiped out. The whole city became empty in an instant. The Tendo looked at the man in black expressionlessly. At that moment, she waved her right hand and the distorted space in front of her returned to normal. Not far from her, stood a man in black. It was the man in black who had appeared in the city before. The man in black looked at the Tendo and said with a hoarse voice, "Are you looking for me?" The Tendo looked at the man in black. "Let me guess. You're not from the spirit realm. You should be from the 6th dimension. Those forces in the 6th dimension can't come looking for trouble now, so you should be from the ancient temple." The man in black narrowed his eyes. "You know the holy temple." The Tendo smiled and said, "I know. Not only do I know the holy temple, but I also know that the book house was brought out by the prophet from the ancient temple." The black-clothed man was silent for a long time. "You've really surprised me. A mere heavenly Tao actually knows so much. However, have you ever heard of this saying? Knowing too much isn't a good thing." After saying this, his right hand suddenly grabbed at the Tendo. In an instant, the space around the Tendo was distorted. However, the Tendo was not affected at all. Seeing this scene, the man in black's eyes suddenly shrank and his voice trembled. "How is it possible?" The Tendo blinked and said with a smile, "Are you surprised? Did you not expect me to be so powerful?" Chapter 1193. The black-clothed man stared at Tendo. At this moment, his heart was tumbling like a tidal wave. He really didn't expect this Tendo of the 5th dimension to be so strong. This is a bit abnormal. Tendo looked at the black-clothed man and smiled. "I have a few questions to ask you. Can you cooperate with me and answer me?" The black-clothed man's body suddenly became illusory. Soon, there were countless afterimages in the sky. Tendo shook her head and smiled, "Playing these fancy tricks in my territory." After saying that, she lightly stomped her right foot. Boom! Heaven and earth trembled. Following this tremble, a figure directly fell in front of her and was then imprisoned by a mysterious force. This person was the black-clothed man. The black-clothed man stared at Tendo. "You know where I come from." Tendo smiled. "Are you trying to use the ancient temple to threaten me?" The black-clothed man looked at Tendo and didn't speak. At this time, it was better for him to choose to be more sensible and not say anything harsh. Tendo glanced at the starry sky and smiled. "I have to admit, the ancient temple is indeed not simple. However, I have to tell you, I'm not afraid of you. Because who would know that I'm the one who killed you?" After saying that, she slapped. Boom! That black-clothed man was directly erased. Tendo clapped her hands and then walked into the distance. After entering the city, Tendo looked around and finally walked to the right. After a while, she arrived in front of a dry well. The well had already dried up. Tendo looked at the dry well and shook her head. "Why did you do samsara? This is great, you've made yourself disappear." After saying that, she put away the dry well and turned to leave. When leaving the city, she seemed to have thought of something. She turned around and waved her right hand. The entire city directly became illusory. After a while, Tendo left. Wu Clan. On this day, a woman walked out of the tomb. The person who came out was Xianxia. And she wasn't in the rebirth realm, she was in the ruler realm. Ruler realm. When seeing Xianxia, Amu was already dumbfounded. Did he advance by 2 levels inside? Right at this moment, another woman walked out. It was Xiaoqi. Xiaoqi hadn't reached the sovereign realm, and she was only at the peak of the samsara realm. However, her sword Dao had reached the 3rd level of the mortal sword realm. Almost at the same time, Zhang Wenxiu also walked out. Zhang Wenxiu had also reached the rebirth state. However, at this moment, Zhang Wenxiu and Xiaoqi looked at Xianxia because Xianxia was in the sovereign realm. Just like that, he had advanced 2 realms? Xianxia glanced at them, and then she said, "It's because of that senior's assistance." Hearing that, Amu instantly understood. It was the woman with the spear. Amu smiled. "Congratulations to the 3 of you." Zhang Wenxiu suddenly looked at Amu. He became stronger, right? This him naturally referred to Yixian. Amu smiled and said, "Yes." 7 suddenly said, "Where is he now?" Amu replied, "He's in closed-door cultivation." 7 nodded, "I'll come look for him in a bit." As soon as she finished speaking, she turned around and left. Zhang Wenxiu said as well, "I'm going to return to the academy." As soon as she finished speaking, she turned around and vanished into the horizon. And Xianxia was just about to speak when a woman suddenly charged out from within the tomb. It was Lian Wanli. Lian Wanli glanced at Xianxia. "You came out by yourself?" And Xianxia replied, "They've left." Lian Wanli was stunned, and then he said, "How long have all of you been out here?" Amu was about to speak when Xianxia suddenly said, "We've been out for 3 days." Amu was speechless. Lian Wanli gazed at Xianxia, "As if I'd believe you." As soon as she finished speaking, she gazed at Amu. "Where's Yixian? I'm going to beat him up." Amu's expression became slightly strange. In his room, Yixian was still cultivating. He'd gained complete control of the Dream Dao Law, and he was working together with Yanjia now. Yanjia was a Fire Dao Law, so he was extremely adept at fire element energy because he possessed heavenly flame within him. So, it didn't take long for him to completely grasp the Fire Dao Law. Of course, this was related to Yanjia's cooperation because Yanjia was actively cooperating with him and fusing with him. After he grasped the Fire Dao Law, Yixian started to fuse with Lian Qian. Lian Qian was a Seal Dao Law, so he knew very little about the energy of seals. Fortunately, he had his big sister's guidance and Lian Qian's cooperation, so his fusion with Lian Qian was extremely smooth. Yixian arrived at the 7th floor, and a woman was sitting there. She was the Dao Law that his big sister had just called back. However, he didn't know what sort of Dao Law she was. The woman gazed at Yixian. "Do you know what sort of Dao Law I am?" Yixian shook his head. The woman walked up to Yixian and grabbed Yixian's shoulder with her left hand. Then, the 2 of them disappeared. When they reappeared, they were already in a starry sky. The woman opened her palm. In an instant, the entire starry sky suddenly trembled. Then, the power of countless stars gathered towards her continuously. Yixian looked at the woman. "Star Dao Law." The woman said softly, "To be precise, it's the starry sky Dao Law. In the starry sky, the power of the stars is endless." Then she looked at Yixian. "If you can completely grasp me, you'll be the ruler of the starry sky. When you stand in the starry sky, your combat strength will increase by at least 30%. 30%. Yixian fell silent. Even though it was only 30%, it was already very terrifying. The woman suddenly said, "Let's begin." With that, she turned into a ray of starlight and entered between Yixian's eyebrows. Boom! In an instant, the power of countless stars swept out of Yixian's body. His body did not reject the power of the stars at all. Not only did it not reject him, but it was also very adapted to it. This was because Tendo had once brought him here to absorb the power of the stars. At this moment, the woman's voice sounded in his mind, "Feel this starry sky. I'll help you to transform into the starry sky and become the ruler of the starry sky." Yi Xian nodded. He closed his eyes, calmed his qi and focused his mind. Then he felt this starry sky. It had to be said that with the cooperation of the Tao law, it was a consumption. With the cooperation of the Tao law, all problems were not problems. Soon, he could affect the power of the stars in the entire starry sky with a single breath. It was extremely shocking. On the other side, the big sister and Lian Qian were looking at Yi Xian. The big sister looked at Yi Xian in silence. No one knew what she was thinking about. Lian Qian suddenly said, "Big sister, are you still thinking about it?" The big sister said calmly, "If I was thinking about it, I wouldn't have come to him. No matter what, he's the only one who can help you fulfill your wish." Lian Qian nodded. The big sister said, "There's another reason." Lian Qian looked at the big sister. The big sister said softly, "I also have a selfish motive." Lian Qian asked, "What selfish motive?" The big sister looked at Yi Xian in the distance. "Mister's origin is not simple. I have a feeling that his origin will bring us some disasters that we can't resist. In the entire fifth dimension, only this guy with countless backers can resist Mister's karma. If I don't take you with me and follow him, I'm afraid that none of us will have a good ending in the future." Lian Qian said in a deep voice, "Big sister, do you know Mister's origin?" The big sister looked at the starry sky. "I know Daoist." Lian Qian was somewhat curious. "Where did Mister come from?" The big sister shook her head. "It's not that I don't want to tell you, but it's meaningless even if I did." As she said this, she looked at Yi Xian in the distance. "We can help each other." Yan Jia suddenly asked, "Can he bear Mister's karma?" The big sister looked at Yi Xian. "He can. And only he can." Lian Qian asked, "Why?" The big sister said indifferently, "Because he has many backers, extremely many. Moreover, they're extremely strong. Only he can bear Mister's karma, and only he isn't afraid of Mister's karma." Yan Jia hesitated for a moment before he said, "Big sister, he's actually quite strong." The big sister shook her head. "He's very outstanding, but just being outstanding isn't enough. He obtained Xiao Ta, and this is both a blessing and a curse. If his life isn't tough enough, then he won't have the fortune to enjoy it." Lian Qian was about to speak when a strand of dazzling starlight suddenly erupted from Yi Xian's body. The powerful starlight shook the space here to the point it rippled violently. At the same time, a powerful aura swept towards the big sister and the other two girls. The big sister waved her right hand lightly, and the powerful starlight was directly shattered. In the distance, Yi Xian opened his eyes. In his eyes, there was a starry light. Meanwhile, Yi Xian opened his palm. In an instant, a ray of starlight descended and descended firmly into his palm. Yi Xian suddenly clenched his right hand, and then the starlight within his palm transformed into Starlight Dreambreaker and dispersed. Yi Xian grinned, and then he suddenly gazed at the big sister. "Big sister, take this." As soon as he finished speaking, he waved his right hand, and then an enormous palm of stars descended from the sky and smashed towards the big sister. Everywhere it passed, the space in its path instantly roiled, and it was an extremely shocking sight. The big sister glanced indifferently at Yi Xian, and then she pointed her right finger upwards. The enormous palm of stars was instantly enveloped by a mysterious force, and it instantly vanished without a trace. Yi Xian was stunned when he witnessed this scene. "It's gone just like that?" At this moment, Lian Qian suddenly laughed. "It's not just you. Even Xingchen can't do anything to the big sister when she uses the power of stars, let alone you. The big sister has two abilities. The first is her own special mysterious power, and the second is to restrain us." Hearing this, Yi Xian smiled sheepishly. No wonder she was called the big sister. The big sister walked in front of Yi Xian, and she looked at Yi Xian. "Xingchen, he's still not very proficient in using the power of stars. Train with him for a few more days." Within Yi Xian's body, Xingchen's voice sounded, "Yes, big sister." The big sister looked at Yi Xian. "Cultivate with Xingchen first." Once you're completely proficient in using the power of stars, go to the 8th floor. Yi Xian hurriedly asked, "What Dao law does the big sister on the 8th floor have?" The big sister said calmly, "Take a guess." Yi Xian. At this moment, Lian Qian smiled faintly. "Second sister's ability will make you excited." Excited. Yi Xian's expression was a little strange. Could it be dual cultivation? P.S. The top 20 monthly votes will receive a reward of $1,000. To be honest, I don't care about money, but actually, I do care about money. Please vote. Chapter 1194. Excitement. Yi Xian had a strange expression. Lian Qian stared at Yi Xian. "What are you thinking about?" Yi Xian hurriedly shook his head. "I'm not." Lian Qian glared at Yi Xian. Big sister suddenly said, "Don't disturb him." Then she left with Lian Qian and Yanjia. In the starry sky, Yi Xian continued to cultivate the Star Dao Law. After coming into contact with the Star Dao Law, he was suddenly curious about the 8th floor and Big Sister's limited special ability. Especially Big Sister's. Although Big Sister had made a move, he still knew nothing about her ability. He was looking forward to it. While Yi Xian was cultivating in the boundless underground city, Tendo came to the pawn shop again. Seeing Tendo, Xiao Dao was expressionless. "What's the matter?" Obviously, she was still angry about Tendo's stupid idea. Let her get together with Yi Xian? Thinking of this, she wanted to beat someone up. Tendo giggled and said seriously, "Xiao Dao, I'm here to discuss business with you." Xiao Dao glanced at Tendo. "I finally found out. You're the most sinister person in the 6th and 5th dimensions." Tendo walked to the counter and drank the spirit tea that Xiao Dao drank in one gulp. Then, she said excitedly, "Do you know what I found out? The ancient temple and the rest have appeared." "The ancient temple?" Xiao Dao frowned. "The ancient temple on the sacred mountain?" Tendo nodded and said excitedly, "Yes, it's them." Xiao Dao's expression became strange. "You seem very excited?" Tendo blinked and said, "They want to kill Yi Xian." Xiao Dao was puzzled. "But Yi Xian has nothing to do with them, right? Don't tell me they want to snatch the study room too?" The Tendo smiled and said, "The prophet came out of the ancient temple." Hearing this, the little Daoist was stunned and a little shocked. "From the ancient temple?" Tendo nodded. "Yes, and the study room was brought out from the ancient temple." Xiao Dao said in a low voice, "My Devil Path family clan has records of this ancient temple. However, there are very few records. I only know that they are very mysterious." Tendo nodded slightly. "They are very mysterious because they existed even earlier than the 6th-dimensional Tendo. Even the 6th dimension Tendo doesn't understand them." Xiao Dao looked at Tendo. "But I think you know them very well." Tendo chuckled. "I know a little about them." Xiao Dao was confused. "How do you know about the ancient temple? Logically speaking, you haven't been to the 6th dimension, right?" Tendo blinked and said mischievously, "Let me tell you, I have been to the 6th dimension." Xiao Dao's expression changed. "How is that possible? How can the 6th dimension let you go up there?" Tendo rolled her eyes at Xiao Dao. "I went up there secretly." Xiao Dao stared at Yi Xian. "You can't go up there quietly." Tendo chuckled. "I can. Not only have I gone up to the 6th dimension, but I have also been beyond it, which is the legendary Dao world. Well, that place is not simple. I was almost discovered. But luckily, they are not very smart and were tricked by me." Xiao Dao looked at Tendo and didn't say anything. At this moment, her heart was like a tsunami. If Tendo wasn't lying, then this woman in front of her was too scary. She is the 5th dimension Tendo. She can go to the 6th dimension. And she can go up there quietly. How terrifying is her strength? How strong is this woman? Most importantly, she has been to the Dao world. She knew about the Dao world because she had come from that place. Xiao Dao was shocked. Tendo gently stroked the teacup and smiled. "Don't look at me like that. Actually, I am not that strong. For example, I can't beat the plain-dressed woman." "Can't beat the plain-dressed woman." Xiao Dao was silent. Tendo's example was very interesting. She said that she can't beat the plain-dressed woman. On the surface, it means that the plain-dressed woman's strength is not that great. However, if you think about it carefully, you will find that this sentence is very problematic. She can't beat the plain-dressed woman, but what about others? Tendo suddenly said, "Don't worry about my strength. As long as my strength is sufficient, it is enough. This time, I came to tell you that you must be mentally prepared," Xiao Dao said in a deep voice. "What mental preparation?" Tian Dao raised a finger. "First, it's about your clan. Although I sent away the people sent by your clan back then, it's still your clan's business. Although I sent away the people sent by your family, do you think your family will really let it go? No, they definitely won't." Saying that, the corners of her mouth lifted. "If I didn't guess wrong, they will even go to find the plain-dressed woman." Tendo's eyelids twitched. "What did you do?" Tendo quickly shook her head. "I didn't do anything. I just want to tell you that your demon Dao family is very powerful. However, it is also because of this that they will become arrogant. Just like the spirit domain. Therefore, they definitely won't let it go. If I didn't guess wrong, they might make a move soon." Xiao Dao was silent. She understood Tendo's meaning. Demon Dao family is very strong. However, it is also because of this that the Demon Dao family won't put anyone in their eyes in this universe. Just like when she first came to this universe. At that time, she didn't put anyone in her eyes. It was because of her arrogance that she suffered a great loss. Tendo said again. "The Demon Dao family won't give up on you because to them, you can be used as a tool for marriage. Of course, this problem isn't particularly serious. The most serious thing is that I think they might kill Yixian." Hearing this, Xiao Dao frowned. "This doesn't make sense, right? They don't know Yixian. Why would they kill Yixian?" Tendo blinked. "I said it's possible." Little Daoist looked at the heavenly Dao. "Did you do something?" Tendo quickly shook her head. Xiao Dao stared at Tendo and didn't say anything. Tian Dao smiled sheepishly. I told you that you and Yixian are already married." Little Daoist suddenly slammed the table and said angrily, "Mu Nian Yan." Heavenly Dao hurriedly said, "I meant well." Xiao Dao glared at Tendo. "Good intentions? Don't you know you will cause the death of my Demon Dao family? Kill Yixian?" If the Demon Dao family really targeted Yixian, with Yixian's terrifying background, she didn't dare to think about it. Although the Demon Dao family was strong, they couldn't compete with Yixian, this freak. What kind of person is Yixian? He's AF** King second generation. He doesn't even know how many people are behind him. Thinking of this, Xiao Dao's heart suddenly ignited with an unknown fire. She was about to explode when Tendo suddenly said, "Do you know why you lost that year?" Xiao Dao stared at Tendo. Tendo smiled. "Because you are kind. You are the most monstrous genius of the Demon Dao family, but you are a woman. The Demon Dao family won't put so much power in your hands. The whole family is in your hands, so the best way is to marry you off. But you? In this period of time, you have many opportunities to turn things around, but you didn't do so." Saying that, she slightly raised the corner of her mouth. "If it was me, I would kill all the male geniuses in the Demon Dao family. At that time, if you didn't choose me, then the Demon Dao family would be finished. But you didn't do that, but they did. Large families are darker than the secular royal family. You have a kind heart, it's not a bad thing, but you don't have a ruthless heart. On this point, you are much worse than Yixian." Xiao Dao was silent. Tendo said again, "Do you think the current Demon Dao family is still the Demon Dao family of the past? I dare to bet that your family will not have a good ending." Xiao Dao slowly clenched her hands. Tendo continued, "That kind of large family is basically a life and death struggle, and you are already out." Xiao Dao looked at Tendo. "What are you trying to say?" Tendo smiled. "You are afraid that the Demon Dao family will be destroyed, but have you ever thought about what they will do if they really think that you have married someone from a lower dimensional universe? They will definitely think that you have insulted the bloodline of the Demon Dao family and think of ways to kill you." Xiao Dao was silent. Because she couldn't refute that the demon Dao family would definitely do that. Tendo said softly, Xiao Dao, I treat you as a friend, so I want to help you. You don't need to doubt my words. Because you have nothing worth scheming against. Let alone you, even your demon Dao family can't give me what I want. Saying that, she looked at Xiao Dao. I just want to help you, that's all. Xiao Dao said in a deep voice, You want to borrow Yi Xian's hand to help me take revenge? Tendo shook her head. You are wrong again. If the demon Dao family comes to find you, with Yi Xian's personality, he will definitely not sit by and do nothing. He will definitely help you, but will your demon Dao family give him face? Definitely not. Xiao Dao was silent. Tendo continued, You only have one path now, and that is to be the leader of the demon Dao family. Xiao Dao looked at Tendo. Are you joking? Tendo smiled. Do I look like I'm joking? Xiao Dao shook her head. The demon Dao family didn't let me be the leader in the past, and they definitely won't now. Tendo sighed. Silly girl, think about Yi Xian. In the past, would the people of Spirit Realm let him be the leader? Definitely not. But now? Isn't Spirit Realm still obedient to him? Xiao Dao looked at Tendo in confusion. What do you want to do? Tendo smiled. I can't bear for you to be depressed like this. I know that you want to recover from your injuries and go back to seek justice, but I can tell you that if you really do that, you will only be sending yourself to death. Xiao Dao looked at Tendo. I don't want to use him. This is my own matter. Tendo smiled. If you don't tell him, then you are using him. But if you clearly tell him that you need him to help you in the future, then you are not using him. Isn't this what friends are like? When he is in trouble, you help him. When you are in trouble, he helps you. As she spoke, she gently patted Xiao Dao's shoulder. She smiled. Be the leader of the demon Dao family. Also, I sincerely advise you to dual cultivate with Yi Xian. Don't be angry. Your demon Dao bloodline can only be suppressed by his bloodline. If you two dual cultivate, there will be unexpected results. Not to mention anything else, you will definitely rise to a higher level. Xiao Dao looked at Tendo. Why don't you dual cultivate with him? If you dual cultivate with him, it will definitely be useful, right? Tendo blinked. I'm Tendo. Do you want to F***CK the heavens? Xiao Dao. Chapter 1195. Realizing that her words were inappropriate, Tendo coughed a few times and then sternly said, I am not a human, why would I do dual cultivation? Xiao Dao lightly said, to have an illicit relationship with a man in order to become stronger, I cannot do such a thing. Tendo smiled and said, I was just giving you a suggestion. Xiao Dao looked at Tendo and said, let me tell you, don't act recklessly. Now she was a bit afraid of this woman. Tendo promptly said, No, I won't act recklessly. Xiao Dao looked at Tendo and said, just now you said that the people from the ancient temple were targeting Yi Xian, and then you were very excited. You seem to want the ancient temple to target Yi Xian? Tendo blinked her eyes and said, did I? Xiao Dao nodded and said, yes. Tendo chuckled and drew a circle on the counter in front of her and said, the fifth dimension's tribulation is about to arrive. When the tribulation arrives, the barrier of the universe will be at its weakest. To put it simply, the fifth dimension is like a sheep, and those various powers are the wolves, including your demonic path family. These wolves are eyeing the fifth dimension covetously and want to take it for themselves. Especially some powers, they have already set their eyes on me. As long as the tribulation arrives, they will be ready to act against me. Xiao Dao was silent. Demonic path family controlled many worlds, and some of these worlds had Tendo. And in those worlds, Tendo was just a subordinate to them. But this woman in front of her was different. She was the most abnormal Tendo she had ever seen. At this time, Tendo's mouth slightly curled up and said, but now, they have found another sheep. Xiao Dao looked at Tendo and said, Yi Xian? Tendo smiled and said, yes, they want to eat both sheep. Xiao Dao said in a low voice, the ancient temple targeted Yi Xian because of the prophet, right? The Tendo nodded. Yes, the prophet brought out the bookstore. This bookstore isn't as simple as resisting the fifth dimension tribulation. In any case, Yi Xian is in trouble. At this point, she sighed softly, don't underestimate the ancient temple. The prophet is not weak, but why was he forced to such a state? Because the ancient temple was stronger. Besides, other than the ancient temple, he has even more powerful enemies. Sigh, what a tragic person. Xiao Dao looked at Tendo. Are you afraid of the ancient temple? Tendo blinked. Am I afraid? Xiao Dao. The Tendo clapped his hands and said with a smile, we have guests. Just as she finished speaking, a middle-aged man walked into the pawnshop. There was a small demon character on the left side of the middle-aged man's chest. Demonic Path family. Seeing the person, Xiao Dao slowly clenched his hands. The middle-aged man looked at the Tendo and said with a smile, Your Excellency is the Tendo of this place? The Tendo smiled and said, Yes. The middle-aged man smiled faintly. Before, someone from my Demonic Path family came here. He said that you are very strong, is that right? The Tendo quickly shook his head. I am just a small Tendo. The middle-aged man smiled and looked at Xiao Dao. Xiao Dao, you are not going to greet your third uncle? Xiao Dao lightly said, What's the matter? The middle-aged man smiled and said, I am here to take you back. Xiao Dao sneered. Take me back? What, do you think I have some value to you? The middle-aged man sighed. Xiao Dao, you are a member of the family. The family has nurtured you. Shouldn't you pay a bit for the family? Xiao Dao stared fixedly at the middle-aged man. I still remember how the family treated me all those years ago. The middle-aged man looked at Xiao Dao. It looks like you haven't repented at all in all these years. Never mind, this isn't something I should worry about. I came to find you because the family has found a marriage for you. The other party is the most monstrous genius of the imperial clan. Not only has he awakened 90% of his bloodline, he has even caused it to mutate. He can be said to be the most monstrous genius in the history of the imperial clan. The family wants you to unite with him and strengthen the bloodline of my Demonic Path family. Xiao Dao sneered. So I really do have some value to you now. The middle-aged man said indifferently, You have received kindness from the family, so you should pay a price for the family. Xiao Dao said fiercely, I have already given everything I have learned to the Demonic Path family in the past. The middle-aged man was expressionless. But it is undeniable that the blood of the Demonic Path family flows within you. If you really want to sever your relationship with the Demonic Path family, then return the blood to the family. Tendo frowned slightly when he heard this. Is he trying to force Xiao Dao to his death? Xiao Dao gazed at the middle-aged man and sneered, What? Are you trying to force me to my death? The middle-aged man spoke indifferently, If you don't compromise, then you must die. Who do you think you are? Suddenly, a voice resounded from outside the door. It was Yi Xian. Tendo blinked when he saw Yi Xian, and the corners of his mouth curled up into an alluring arc. Yi Xian walked into the pawnshop and arrived by Xiao Dao's side. Xiao Dao spoke in a low voice, This has nothing to do with you. Yi Xian smiled, What nonsense are you talking about? Miss Xiao Dao, your problem is my problem. How ignorant. The middle-aged man gazed at Yi Xian and smiled. You want to be a hero and save a damsel in distress? Young man, do you know who is standing in front of you? Do you know what the consequences of what you said just now will bring to you? Yi Xian turned to look at Xiao Dao. Is the Diabolism family very powerful? The little Daoist said indifferently, To you, it's not powerful. Yi Xian was speechless. What a joke. The middle-aged man gazed at Yi Xian, and he waved his right hand. A powerful force swept out. Yi Xian suddenly stabbed out with his sword. One sword, one thought. Bang. The middle-aged man's powerful force was shattered. The middle-aged man was slightly stunned when he saw this. Sword thought. As he spoke, he sized up Yi Xian. You're quite capable. Yi Xian looked at the middle-aged man. I don't really want to interfere in your family's matters, but Xiao Dao is my friend. Since she doesn't want to go back, then don't force her. A wisp of ridicule arose on the corners of the middle-aged man's mouth. Who do you think you are? Tendo suddenly said, "He's the person Xiao Dao chose, the son-in-law of your diabolism family." Yi Xian was dumbfounded. What the hell? Xiao Dao looked at Tendo and didn't speak. Yi Xian was about to speak when the middle-aged man suddenly pointed at Yi Xian and laughed. Him? Who the hell is he to be the son-in-law of my diabolism family? He isn't even worthy of carrying shoes for my diabolism family. Tendo blinked, and then he nodded. Right. You're right. He isn't worthy. There was no need to wake up some idiots. The best way was to make them continue being idiots. Meanwhile, the middle-aged man looked at Yi Xian, an ant from a lowly world. If you were in my diabolism family, you would only be worthy of being a lowly slave. Yi Xian was dumbfounded. He turned to look at Xiao Dao. Does the diabolism family have such a sense of superiority? Xiao Dao was silent. In front of others, the diabolism family did have the capital to be arrogant. But in front of this fellow, what capital did the diabolism family have to be arrogant? What capital did they have to be arrogant? However, she didn't know how to explain it to the middle-aged man. Because she knew that even if she said it, the other party wouldn't believe her. So, she simply didn't say it. At this time, the middle-aged man still wanted to say something, but Yi Xian suddenly stabbed out with his sword. The middle-aged man didn't retreat, but his fist smashed onto Yi Xian's sword. Bang! In an instant, the middle-aged man retreated hundreds of feet, and he retreated out of the hall. But Yi Xian didn't retreat even half a step. The power of Dao laws. After absorbing countless Dao laws, his current strength couldn't be compared to before. Especially after his sword Dao reached the sword sense level, it could be said that he was invincible under self-release. As for the person in front of him, he clearly hadn't reached the self-release realm. After being forced back by Yi Xian's sword, the middle-aged man was in disbelief. Yi Xian turned to look at Xiao Dao. Do you want to kill me? He really wanted to kill him, but it was up to Xiao Dao. Xiao Dao was about to speak when the middle-aged man in the distance said fiercely, "Kill me? Ha, what a joke. If something happens to me here, let me tell you, your entire fifth dimension will be razed to the ground." Yi Xian, on the side, Tendo shook his head. Heavens, how can a large family have such a retard? Is this arrogance? I can't watch it anymore. Xiao Dao also couldn't bear to watch. In fact, she understood the middle-aged man quite well. Under normal circumstances, it wouldn't be difficult for a demon Dao family to destroy the fifth dimension. However, the current fifth dimension was simply an abnormal existence. Firstly, there was Tendo. She didn't know how strong she was, but she knew that she didn't place a demon Dao family in her eyes at all. Secondly, there was Yi Xian. Who was this person? She was a top second generation. Not to mention anything else, just this woman was enough to annihilate an entire demon Dao family. The middle-aged man wanted to say something, but at this moment, Yi Xian suddenly said, "Don't speak. I really can't stand you anymore." After saying that, he leaped up and stabbed out with his sword. The space around the middle-aged man instantly became illusory under the might of this sword strike. From the side, this sword strike seemed very ordinary, but the middle-aged man's expression changed drastically. He suddenly pressed his hands together in front of him with the intention of catching Yi Xian's sword strike. Bang! His palms directly clamped down on Yi Xian's sword, but in the next moment, Yi Xian's right hand twisted slightly, and the middle-aged man's palms were sent flying. However, the middle-aged man also retreated several dozen feet, distancing himself from Yi Xian. He stared at Yi Xian. "Do you know what you're doing? I'm from a demon Dao family." Yi Xian shook his head. "My head hurts." After saying that, he was about to attack. The middle-aged man's expression changed, and he turned to run. Yi Xian was about to chase after him, but Tendo quickly said, "Don't chase after him, I'll go." After saying that, she directly chased after him. Yi Xian blinked, then looked at Xiao Dao. "What is she going to do?" Xiao Dao said in a deep voice, "It's definitely not something good." In the sky, a figure suddenly appeared in front of the middle-aged man. It was Tendo. Seeing Tendo, the middle-aged man's expression changed. "You're so fast." Tendo smiled. "Don't be nervous, I'm not here to cause trouble for you." After all, I don't dare to offend a demon Dao family. The middle-aged man stared at Tendo. What do you want? Tendo said seriously, do you know why Yi Xian is so arrogant down there? He doesn't even care about your demon Dao family. After a moment of silence, the middle-aged man said, he has a backer. Tendo quickly said, yes. He has a backer. The middle-aged man looked at Tendo. Is it the plain-dressed woman that you told our people about? Tendo nodded. Yes, his biggest backer is that plain-dressed woman. After saying that, she handed a portrait to the middle-aged man. This is her portrait. I'm telling you, you must be careful of her, especially don't go looking for her, she's really powerful. The middle-aged man sneered. Then do you know how powerful my demon Dao family is? Tendo blinked. I don't know. The middle-aged man coldly snorted. He put away the portrait. Go back and tell him that my demon Dao family will bring this woman's head to him. We will let him know that his so-called backer is less than an ant in the eyes of my demon Dao family. Tendo quickly shook her head. No, she's very, very powerful. Don't go looking for her, really? The middle-aged man suddenly said unhappily, don't you think you're annoying? Tendo. P.S. Last night I had a dream. I dreamed that I was first in the monthly votes. Chapter 1196. The middle-aged man left. He left with the portrait of the woman in the plain dress that Tendo gave him. In the starry sky, Tendo looked at the middle-aged man who disappeared at the end of the starry sky and grinned. Good luck, hee. At this moment, a woman walked out from behind Tendo. It was Agio. Tendo looked at Agio. Did Yi Xian ask you to kill him? Agio nodded. Tendo smiled and said, it's fine. You can go back. Agio looked at Tendo. You are a swordsman. Tendo nodded. Yes. Agio said casually, want to spar? Tendo shook her head. No spar. Agio frowned slightly. Why? Tendo smiled and said, my sword is used to kill, not to spar. With that said, she turned and left. At this moment, Agio suddenly appeared in front of her again. She looked at Tendo. Spar. Tendo blinked. I admit defeat. With that said, her figure turned illusory. Agio suddenly drew her sword and stabbed out. The space where Tendo was immediately turned illusory. However, Tendo still disappeared without a trace. That sword was unable to stop Tendo. Agio was silent. At this moment, a woman walked out from behind her. It was Situ. Situ said softly, this Tendo is much stronger than that person from Spirit Region. Agio sheathed her sword. He is very dangerous. Very dangerous. Situ nodded. Agio said, let's go. With that said, the two women left. In the pawnshop, Xiao Dao looked at Yi Xian. You shouldn't have meddled in this matter. Yi Xian smiled and said, I can't just watch you get bullied. Xiao Dao hesitated and said, I might need your help in the future. Yi Xian smiled and said, all right. Xiao Dao looked at Yi Xian. Aren't you going to ask me what I need your help with? Yi Xian shook his head and smiled. You're my friend. With that, he turned around and left. Friends. In the pawnshop, Xiao Dao was silent. Yi Xian returned to the Wu clan and continued to cultivate. Presently, he was already capable of skillfully controlling the energy of the stars, and if he were to fight that middle-aged man in the starry sky earlier, then he was confident in his ability to kill that middle-aged man with a single strike of his sword. In the starry sky, he was the ruler of the starry sky. Now, he was going to fuse with the 8th floor's Dao Law. Yi Xian arrived at the 8th floor. On the 8th floor stood a woman. She wore a black dress, and her features were like a painting. She was very beautiful, but her eyes were a bit cold. Yi Xian walked in and smiled. Hello. The woman walked over to Yi Xian, and then she sized up Yi Xian and said, you really are quite similar. Yi Xian was slightly puzzled. What? The woman shook her head. It's nothing. As soon as she finished speaking, she suddenly grabbed Yi Xian's shoulder. In the next moment, the space around them trembled, and it wasn't long before they appeared in the night sky. The woman gazed at the night sky and spoke softly, I'm the Tao law of a domain, and I've gathered a myriad of domains into myself. Since ancient times until now, I've basically possessed all the domains. The Tao law of a domain. Yi Xian was stunned, and then he said, "Are you going to teach me all the domains?" The woman shook her head. "No, I want you to understand a myriad of domains. Because I know their strengths and weaknesses, and that includes yours." As she spoke, she gazed at Yi Xian. "Activate the sword domain." Yi Xian hesitated for a moment, and then he activated the sword domain. The woman stomped her right foot lightly on the ground, and then a strand of mysterious energy surged towards the surroundings. In an instant, Yi Xian's sword domain had vanished without a trace. Yi Xian's expression instantly changed when he witnessed this scene. He stared at the woman and asked, "How did you accomplish that?" The woman gazed at Yi Xian and said, "What's the foundation of your sword domain?" Yi Xian said in a low voice, "The sword." The woman asked another question. "What's the foundation of the sword?" Yi Xian answered, "Man." The woman asked another question. "What's the foundation of man?" Yi Xian was stunned. The woman gazed at Yi Xian and said, "Man uses the heavens and the earth as his foundation. You're in this world, so you're within the Grand Tao. Within the Grand Tao, you have to rely on the heavens and the earth. I wasn't destroying your sword domain just now, I was destroying your foundation." As she spoke, she withdrew a wooden stick and said, "The best way to break this stick is to exert force from the center. But there's actually a better way. You can use a saber and not your hand. Isn't it simpler to use a saber than your hand?" Yi Xian fell silent. The woman said, "Actually, very few people care about the essence of the essence of the essence. As it said, destroying all techniques with a single strike of the sword is to use the simplest method to deal with a problem." Yi Xian said in a low voice, "I used my sword perception as my foundation." The woman interrupted Yi Xian and said, "Indeed, your sword domain is very formidable because you possess your sword perception. However, I didn't target your sword perception. It's like hitting a snake where it hurts. A snake's venom is very strong, so why go head-on against its venom? You just have to punch it where it hurts, and it would be gone. Your sword perception is very formidable, but I didn't target your sword perception. Because your sword domain is based on this expanse of space and the earth here, and I target this expanse of space and the earth here. Do you understand what I mean?" Yi Xian was enlightened when he heard this. "I understand. Then how should I counter it?" The woman said, "Let's not talk about that for now. What you have to do now is learn the domain of others." Yi Xian nodded and said, "All right." Actually, he wanted to learn the domain of others as well. The woman waved her hand lightly, and then the space before her and Yi Xian started to warp. It didn't take long for some experts to appear in that expanse of space. Yi Xian's expression gradually became solemn. The sword domain wasn't the only domain of the sword in this world. However, he didn't know much about the other domains because he very rarely encountered experts who possessed a domain. But at this moment, after he saw the domains of some experts, he noticed that they were really very strong. Just like that, the woman ceaselessly demonstrated those domains to Yi Xian. He even saw sword domains amongst them, and there was more than one. Only now did he realize that not all swordsmen's sword domains were the same. Every single swordsman's sword domain was different. Some sword domains were used to kill, some were used to defend, and there were even some that were used to flee. A single strike of the sword could send one flying 500,000 kilometers. Besides the sword domain, there were other domains like the saber domain, the spear domain. At any rate, there were all sorts of domains. Just like that, time trickled by. Around 2 days later, Yi Xian sat down cross-legged and started to comprehend. Even though he'd comprehended 3 types of domains, he still didn't know much about them, because he very rarely saw other experts utilize domains. But now, he'd witnessed thousands of domains. Learning from them, he was currently learning from the advantages of those domains. The woman looked at Yi Xian and nodded slightly. Yi Xian's natural talent and comprehension ability were extremely good, and he understood everything with a single point. In the beginning, she was slightly worried that Yi Xian would be lost after experiencing so many domains. But now it would seem like he wasn't worried at all. Just like that, time trickled by. Around 5 days later, Yi Xian stood up and took a step forward. In the next moment, he'd appeared 300 m away. Sword domain. Yi Xian was slightly excited because he noticed that it really worked. So long as he willed it, then he could instantly appear anywhere he wanted within the sword domain. This wasn't just pure speed. This was teleportation. Within the sword domain, he'd surpassed the scope of speed. As if he'd thought of something, Yi Xian suddenly stabbed with his sword. As he stabbed with his sword, a ray of light flashed from over 100 m away. This strike disregarded space and distance. Yi Xian instantly became excited when he witnessed this scene. His sword disregarded everything within the sword domain, including space and time. Yi Xian attacked once more, and it didn't take long for numerous rays of light to appear within the sword domain. These rays of light appeared in an extremely mysterious and traceless manner. It was like they'd emerged from space, and it was extremely mysterious. Meanwhile, the 8th Dao ancestor appeared by Yi Xian's side. Yi Xian gazed at the woman, and the woman nodded. "You've learned well." Yi Xian put his sword away and said, "Young miss, may I know your name?" The woman replied, "Su Su." "Su Su." Yi Xian nodded slightly. "Miss Su Su, it's time for me to go look for Big Sister." Su Su gazed at Yi Xian. "What are you thinking about?" "We haven't even started yet." Yi Xian said, "I've already learned how to utilize the sword domain." Su Su shook her head and chuckled. "Not yet. I'm just letting you understand domains." Yi Xian spoke solemnly. "What do you mean?" Su Su spoke softly. "I'm the Dao law of a domain. Don't you want to know about my special ability?" Yi Xian hurriedly asked, "What special ability?" Su Su smiled. "Activate the sword domain." Yi Xian hesitated for a moment before he issued a command with his will, and the sword domain appeared here. Right at this moment, Su Su suddenly vanished. A moment later, the space within the sword domain trembled violently, and then some sort of force appeared here. Yi Xian was quite surprised. "What's that?" Su Su's voice suddenly resounded. "My special ability is to allow your domain to temporarily transcend this world. Simply speaking, if someone fights you, then that person won't be able to break through your domain by force. Even a self-release realm expert wouldn't be able to accomplish it. Unless that person possesses the strength of those 3 swords at the top of the pagoda. Otherwise, an ordinary expert wouldn't be able to break through your domain at all. Moreover, once I fuse with you, you'll be able to rely on my strength to imitate the myriad domain. Even though you won't be able to use that domain forever, you'll be able to rely on this imitation to swiftly find your opponent's flaws." Yi Xian was instantly unable to maintain his calm when he heard this. Imitate the myriad domain. How freakish was that? So long as he willed it, he could be a spear cultivator, saber cultivator, fist cultivator. Moreover, if he encountered another expert in the future, then so long as that expert utilized their domain, then he would be able to swiftly find their flaws. Su Su is too freakish. Su Su continued, "Don't let your thoughts run wild. Fuse well with me now, and when you fight others in the future, you just have to issue a command and I'll become one with you." Yi Xian suddenly asked, "Su Su, what's Big Sister's ability?" He was extremely curious about his big sister's ability. That was his big sister, the big sister of all Dao laws. Her ability was absolutely freakish. Chapter 1197. Hearing Yi Xian's words, Su Su smiled and said, "You will know soon enough." Yi Xian was speechless. Why did everyone like to keep him in suspense? In the following period of time, Yi Xian began to cultivate crazily, fusing with Su Su. During this period, he discovered that Su Su was more terrifying than he had imagined. Her amplification of his 3 domains could be described as terrifying, heaven-defying. While Yi Xian was cultivating, the 5th dimension had also undergone great changes. After the arrival of the experts from the spirit realm, the 5th dimension had become very lively. Of course, the more people there were, the more disputes there were. During this period, the fifth dimension also experienced some chaos, but fortunately, they were all suppressed by a Mu. Now, the ones in charge of the fifth dimension were a Mu and a Qian. The two sisters represented Yi Xian. Although the two girls were not that strong, no one dared to look down on them because they had Yi Xian behind them. In a room, a Qian and a Mu were discussing some matters. A Qian said in a deep voice, "Too many people from spirit realm have come." A Mu nodded, "Yes, there are a lot." A Qian looked at a Mu, "The more they come, the harder it is to control them." Saying this, she said helplessly, "Why does that guy want the people of spirit realm to come?" A Mu smiled, "Very simple, he wants to gather the power of the entire fifth dimension to resist the fifth dimension calamity." A Qian said in a deep voice, "That kind of calamity is not something an ordinary person can resist." A Mu asked in reply, "Then are we just going to let them wait for death?" Saying this, she looked at a Qian. "Have you ever thought that if the fifth dimension calamity comes, and there is no one to lead them, under that kind of despair, what do you think they will do?" A Qian was silent. A Mu said softly, "There's nothing a person who's desperate can do. Moreover, I feel that if all the experts of the fifth dimension and spirit realm join forces, they may be able to resist the fifth dimension calamity." A Qian was silent. The top powerhouses of the entire universe had all joined hands? Such a thing had never happened before in history. A Mu smiled. Just as he was about to speak, a woman walked in. It was Guan Yin. A Mu looked at Guan Yin. "Is something the matter, Miss Guan?" Guan Yin glanced at a Mu and said, "There are many conflicts between spirit realm and the people of the fifth dimension. How do you plan to resolve them?" A Mu was about to speak when a voice suddenly sounded, "Kill whoever causes trouble." The three girls turned around and saw Yi Xian walking over slowly from afar. Guan Yin looked at Yi Xian. "Some conflicts can't be resolved by killing." Yi Xian looked at Guan Yin. "Then we'll keep killing." With that said, he looked at a Mu. "Pass down the order. Kill anyone who dares to cause trouble." A Mu hesitated for a moment, then nodded. "All right." With that, she retreated. A Qian looked at Yi Xian and smiled. "You've broken through?" Yi Xian nodded and smiled. "I heard you've been very busy recently." A Qian hurriedly said, "Not very busy, very, very busy. Really, we've been so busy that we've almost fainted." Yi Xian nodded. "You can call more people to help. For example." With that said, he looked at Guan Yin. "For example, Miss Guan." Guan Yin glanced at Yi Xian and didn't speak. Yi Xian then said, "A Qian, I'm preparing to form an alliance. I've already thought of a name. It'll be called the Fifth Dimension Alliance." A Qian blinked. "In the blink of an eye, five-dimensional alliance?" Yi Xian nodded. "No matter if it's the forces of spirit realm or the fifth dimension, they must all join the Fifth Dimension Alliance." A Qian hesitated, then said, "If we force it like this, I'm afraid many people will be disgusted." Yi Xian shook his head. "Now is not the time to be merciful. The fifth dimension tribulation is about to arrive, and I don't want to cause internal strife before it arrives." A Qian wanted to say something, but at this time, Guan Yin suddenly said, "We can do this. Announce the seriousness of the fifth dimension tribulation to everyone and let them know about it. Then tell them that as long as they are willing to join the Fifth Dimension Alliance, they can resist the Fifth Dimension Tribulation together with us. If they aren't willing, then when the Fifth Dimension Tribulation arrives in the future, we won't care if they aren't a member of the Alliance." Yi Xian was silent. A Qian looked at Yi Xian. At this time, Guan Yin said, "This way, many forces will fight to join our alliance because we are strong enough. Let alone others, as long as the ancient race, St. Hall, and my spirit race join, other forces will definitely follow suit. Moreover, they will beg us to let them join." Yi Xian nodded. "This method is feasible." Guan Yin continued, "We must publicize the dangers of the fifth dimension tribulation so that everyone has an understanding of it. At the same time, I suggest that we form an alliance army. This army's mission is to enforce the law. Any forces that cause trouble during this period of time will be killed without mercy. Of course, In order to avoid killing the innocent, the Alliance army must be led by someone you can trust. Yi Xian nodded. I have a choice. Guan Yin nodded. The experts of the spirit realm are stronger than those of the fifth dimension. In order to avoid conflicts between the two sides, I suggest that the experts of both sides split up. The spirit realm will live on one side, while the fifth dimension will live on the other. Both sides will cooperate, but they will also be separated to avoid conflicts between large and small. Yi Xian looked at Guan Yin. Continue. Guan Yin nodded. In order to resist the fifth dimension tribulation, we definitely need the main force of experts. We must train more experts. As she said this, she looked at Yi Xian. Gather the resources of all the forces to train them. Of course, we can only train those with top talent. Qian suddenly said, this is easy to say but difficult to do. We don't have that many cultivation resources. Guan Yin said gravely, the spirit realm does. Yi Xian and Qian looked at Guan Yin. Guan Yin said softly, the spirit race, the ancient race, and the Saint Hall, our three forces have deep foundations. If we work together, it won't be difficult to train another batch of origin-breaking realm experts. Yi Xian looked at Guan Yin. Using your benefits? Guan Yin nodded. Yi Xian asked, are you willing? Guan Yin said, if we can't survive the fifth dimension tribulation, are we going to bury those resources with us? Yi Xian was silent. Guan Yin said, don't worry, the ancient race and the Saint Hall will agree because they know how terrifying the fifth dimension tribulation is. You don't need to worry about them having any thoughts about you. Right now, what those peak forces fear the most is that you don't care. Yi Xian was puzzled. Guan Yin said, because the sixth dimension is willing to bring you up. As long as you are willing, you can leave this universe at any time. And in this universe, only you can lead everyone to resist the fifth dimension tribulation. It can be said that the people of this universe need you, not the other way around. Therefore, they are afraid that you will leave. As she said this, she looked at Yi Xian. My spirit race is also afraid. It could be said that if the fifth dimension didn't have Yi Xian, the fifth dimension would have no hope at all. Once the fifth dimension tribulation arrived, how many people would die? Moreover, if there was no Yi Xian, the fifth dimension would fall into chaos. The reason why the fifth dimension was so peaceful was because of Yi Xian's suppression. If Yi Xian wasn't here, she didn't dare to imagine how chaotic the fifth dimension would become. At this time, Yi Xian suddenly said, let's do as you said before. Also, I have an idea, and that is to have the ancient race, spirit race, and Saint Temple send someone to be an elder of the fifth dimension alliance. The authority of an elder is second only to the alliance master. What do you think? Guan Yin asked, how many elders will there be? Yi Xian said, 7. Guan Yin said, 3 from the spirit realm? Yi Xian looked at Guan Yin. Miss Guan, it's best not to divide the spirit realm into the fifth dimension. Do you understand what I mean? Guan Yin glanced at Yi Xian and nodded. I understand. Yi Xian said, Miss Guan, you have full authority to handle the matter you just mentioned. Is there a problem? Guan Yin nodded. No problem. Yi Xian nodded slightly. Go do what you need to do. Guan Yin didn't say anything else and retreated. Qian looked at Yi Xian. This Miss Guan is really not bad. Yi Xian nodded. It couldn't be denied that Guan Yin's ability was very strong. Whether it was her personal strength or her battle prowess, they were the best in this universe. Qian said again, what do you plan to do next? Yi Xian said, increase the strength of everyone. Saying this, he slowly closed his eyes. What we need to do now is to increase the strength of the entire fifth dimension. Qian was silent. Increase the strength of the entire fifth dimension. She could see that Yi Xian was serious this time. He could have left, but for the sake of his friends, he stayed. Since he was staying, he would definitely do his job well and lead everyone to survive. Fifth dimension calamity. Qian suddenly smiled. Then let's fight against this fifth dimension calamity. Yi Xian smiled. Let's fight. A moment later, Yi Xian left. Yi Xian returned to his courtyard. The current him had already fused perfectly with Su Su. As long as he wanted, Su Su could become one with him at any time. It had to be said that these Dao laws taking the initiative to help him was twice the result with half the effort. This was because there were many things that he didn't need to understand. They would do it themselves, and they would even take the initiative to cooperate with him. And now, he was still missing the last Dao law. Big Sister. According to Big Sister, once all the Dao laws were gathered, they would be invincible in the fifth dimension. He really looked forward to it. If all the Dao laws were gathered, how strong would they be? Yi Xian slowly closed his eyes. The next moment, he was already in the prison pagoda. Yi Xian came to the 8th floor. Because the 9th floor hadn't left, Big Sister was also on the 8th floor. It was worth mentioning that the 9th floor was now in the prison pagoda. This guy said that the prison pagoda was the safest now. When Yi Xian came to the 9th floor, Big Sister had already been waiting there for a long time. Yi Xian walked in front of Big Sister and smiled. Big Sister. Big Sister looked at Yi Xian. Are you curious about what kind of Dao law I am? Yi Xian nodded. Yes. Big Sister smiled. My Dao law is slightly more special than theirs. Yi Xian asked, Big Sister was also created by the Prophet? Big Sister nodded. Yes. My existence is both to restrain the sisters and to strengthen them. Yi Xian was stunned. Then he said, Big Sister is a support-type Dao law? Big Sister nodded. After saying that, she gently placed her right hand on Yi Xian's shoulder. Boom! Yi Xian's body trembled. Chapter 1198. At this moment, Yi Xian could feel all the Dao laws. It was different from before because at this moment, he felt like those Dao laws were a part of his body. Every Dao law was a part of Yi Xian's body. A true perfect fusion. Big Sister looked at Yi Xian. How do you feel now? Yi Xian was a little excited. I feel like they're a part of my body. Big Sister nodded. I have 3 abilities. The first is amplification. I can greatly increase the abilities of every Dao law. You can try activating the Dao law now. Yi Xian nodded. He left Xiao Ta and appeared outside. Then, the space Dao law appeared between his brows. He opened his palm, and the surrounding space started to strangely decompose, layer by layer. At this moment, the space he was in became extremely strange. Yi Xian shifted his consciousness. In an instant, the space around him went back to normal. Yi Xian suddenly said, Dodge. As his voice fell, he had already appeared several dozen feet away. Spatial teleportation. This had already surpassed the scope of speed. It was directly spatial teleportation, a kind of change in position between 2 spaces. Yi Xian suddenly opened his palm. Gather! In the blink of an eye, a powerful force suddenly appeared in his palm. The power of space. The power that was absorbed from the surrounding space. Big Sister's voice suddenly sounded. With your current ability, together with the Space Dao Law and me, you can instantly shatter the surrounding space for hundreds of thousands of miles. Of course, using such a great power will cause your body to suffer a bit of backlash. Because your current strength is not enough to completely withstand such a great power. If you can reach the self-release realm, you can affect the entire 5th dimension with a single thought. Affect the 5th dimension. Yi Xian's expression changed. This was too heaven-defying. Big Sister said again, my second ability is my unique special ability, Dark Extermination. Yi Xian was a little confused. Dark Extermination? Big Sister said, yes, with a single thought, all things can be Dark Extermination. Yi Xian said, what is Dark Extermination? Eldest Sister said softly, it is the dark night. This world is divided into yin and yang, as well as day and night. I can forcefully reverse the white and black, and control the dark matter energy in the night. As the voice faded, the world in front of Yi Xian suddenly darkened. Everything could not be seen. Big Sis said, dark matter exists in the dark space. It's an extremely lethal force. Now, you can use me to feel this force. Yi Xian nodded and slowly closed his eyes. Gradually, he sensed some strange power around him. Dark power. These forces existed in this space. No, it should be said that these forces were everywhere, but very few people could detect them and control them. Big Sister's voice sounded again. Let me teach you how to control this dark force. Yi Xian nodded. All right. In the following days, Yi Xian began to learn dark power from his elder sister. On this day, a white-robed old man suddenly appeared somewhere in the starry sky. As soon as the white-robed elder appeared, a woman appeared in front of him. Tendo. Tendo looked at the white-robed elder and said with a smile, Demonic Path family? The white-robed elder looked at Tendo. You're just a little Tendo. Why do I feel that you're so dangerous? Tendao smiled and said, Is that so? That might be your misconception. The white-robed elder looked deeply at Tendo, but in the end he did not dare to make a move. This person in front of him was unfathomable. He did not dare to move. Tendo suddenly asked, What's the matter? The white-robed elder said softly, I'm here to confirm something. Tendo asked, What is it? The white-robed elder looked at Tendo. Rumor has it that there's an extraordinary person in the fifth dimension called the Prophet. He claims to know the past and the future, and he has a mysterious bookhouse, right? Tendo narrowed her eyes, and the smile on her face suddenly disappeared. The next moment, she gently swiped with her fingers. The white-robed elder's throat was directly split open, and his head flew out. Blood splattered. It was an instant kill. The moment the white-robed elder's head flew out, he had a strange smile on his face. Tendo's expression was a bit solemn. At this moment, a voice came from beside her. What's the matter? Tendo said softly, Something big has happened. That voice was somewhat puzzled. What big matter? Tendo shook her head. I promised him that year that I would help him hide his true identity, but now it seems that I can't hide it anymore. As she said this, she raised her head and looked at the starry sky, saying softly, He came really fast. That voice asked again, The him you mentioned is the Prophet? Tendo said softly, Who else could it be other than him? That voice asked again, Who is he? Tendo said softly, A pitiful guy. Of course, Yi Xian is even more pitiful, this scapegoat. As she said this, she shook her head. No, if something big happens, who can bear it? I have to hide for a while. It's too dangerous. As she said this, she turned and ran. That voice suddenly sounded, Aren't you going to warn him? Tendo's voice floated from afar. I have already warned him. Below, Yi Xian, who was cultivating, suddenly opened his eyes, and Tendo's voice sounded in his head, Dangerous, very dangerous, very dangerous. Don't look for me, I have already left the fifth dimension. Yi Xian was somewhat puzzled. Dangerous? Very dangerous? What the hell? What the hell is going on? Yi Xian was confused. At this time, the elder sister's voice suddenly sounded. She doesn't seem to be joking. Yi Xian said in a deep voice, I know she is not joking, but what is the danger? His current enemies could be said to be relatively few. There were no enemies in the fifth dimension, but there were some in the sixth dimension, but they should be few. It could be said that unless all the forces in the sixth dimension joined forces to attack him, he should not be in that much danger. But from Tendo's tone, it seemed that he was going to die for sure. What is the danger? He really wanted to ask, but he could not contact her. That woman couldn't really have left the fifth dimension, right? The elder sister said in a deep voice, You can't contact her? Yi Xian shook his head. His expression was somewhat solemn. He knew that although Tendo was usually joking, she was still very reliable when it came to serious matters. She must have discovered something dangerous, so she reminded him. What kind of danger could it be? Yi Xian pondered. After a moment, the elder sister suddenly said, Don't think too much. No matter what danger it is, you have to face it. Right now, your top priority is to fuse with me as soon as possible. At that time, you will have the capital to deal with any danger. Yi Xian nodded. As the elder sister said, his top priority now was to improve himself, completely master the Tao law, and use all the abilities of the prison pagoda. As for danger, how many times had he encountered in his life? Without thinking too much, Yi Xian began to cultivate. Somewhere in the starry sky, in the depths of this starry sky, there stood an extremely grand palace. The palace spanned tens of thousands of miles, like a giant beast hiding in the starry sky, causing people to feel fear. Demon Dao Palace. The Demon Dao clan was not in the sixth dimension, nor was it in the fifth dimension. They were similar to the spirit realm, belonging to an independent world, the Dao world. However, unlike the spirit realm, the universe they were in was very big, even bigger than the sixth dimension. Above the sixth dimension was the Dao world. This place was known as the origin of the great Dao. The legendary ancient scripture, the Dao scripture, originated from this place. The Dao world's ancient history recorded. In the first year of the immemorial era, scriptures descended from the heavens and spread to the various worlds. The Dao scripture was known as the number 1 wondrous book, and the origin of the self-release realm came from one of the scriptures. The great Dao has 50, the heavens have 49, and man has only 1. And because of this sentence, a super expert, Yi Lanting, appeared in the Dao world. She was the first self-release realm expert in the Dao world. And what she obtained was only 1 page of the scripture. Moreover, this page was not complete, it was a remnant page. According to the records, the Dao scripture had a total of 9 pages. After Yi Lanting achieved the great Dao, she began to frantically search for the remaining remnant pages of the Dao scripture, but there was no more. Some said she found it. Some said she did not find it. In any case, she was no longer here. It was unknown whether she was alive or dead. The Dao scripture had become a legend, but the people of the Dao world had never given up on searching for it, especially those experts who had reached the great Dao self-release realm. Their obsession with the Dao scripture had reached a crazy level. Because after they reached self-release, they were lost. There was no path ahead. How could they go? Many self-release realm experts couldn't find a path even after comprehending for their entire lives. They knew that if they wanted to continue walking, they could only find that Dao scripture. Even if they found a remnant page, it was fine. In the history of the Dao world, countless experts had frantically searched for the Dao scripture. Moreover, these experts were basically all self-release realm experts. In modern history, the Dao scripture had really appeared once. Yi Qingji. Yi Lanting's descendant, Yi Qingji, was a heaven-warping genius, reaching self-release before the age of 20, becoming the most monstrous genius in the history of the Dao world, shocking the Dao world. However, it attracted a great disaster. Because at that time, it was rumored that Yi Qingji obtained the Dao scripture left behind by his ancestor, Yi Lanting. On the day of Yi Lanting's breakthrough, 39 peak self-release realm experts gathered at the Yi family. After that day, the entire Yi family was exterminated, and Yi Qingji's whereabouts were unknown. Everyone knew that Yi Qingji hadn't died, because those great factions had frantically searched for him. However, there was no news at all. It was as if Yi Qingji had vanished from the face of the earth. In the Demon Dao Hall, a middle-aged man was sitting. This person was the current patriarch of the Demon Dao family, Mo Yuan. The entire hall was empty. Only Mo Yuan was there. At this moment, the space in front of Mo Yuan suddenly trembled slightly. Gradually, Mo Yuan's calm expression changed. After a moment, Mo Yuan slowly clenched his fists. After a while, Mo Yuan slowly closed his eyes. Yishen. Samsara. What a good samsara. What a good Yi Qingji. You actually used this kind of method to avoid the pursuit of the Dao world's experts. No wonder no one was able to find any news about you all these years. At this moment, a voice rang out beside Mo Yuan. I've already investigated. That plain-dressed woman is at the self-release realm. Only someone at the self-release realm can forcefully break through the barrier of the universe and enter our Dao world from the sixth dimension. Mo Yuan's eyes narrowed. It's impossible for a self-release realm expert to appear in the fifth dimension. There is only one explanation. The Dao scripture is in the lower realm. The study room. The Dao scripture must be in that study room. At this moment, the voice suddenly rang out. What about the plain-dressed woman? Mo Yuan's eyes flashed with killing intent. This woman must have seen the Tao scripture. She can't be left alive. Let the black and white emissaries detain her. Remember, don't let them kill anyone. Leave her alive. I want her alive. The voice said, understood. Immediately arrange it. P.S. Today is the birthday of my book friend, Bao. She wants me to add one chapter. I feel that I can't refuse, so I added one chapter. Happy birthday to Bao. Chapter 1199. Inside the palace, Missouri Yuan slowly closed his eyes. At this moment, he was abnormally excited. Yi Qingji, the person that the entire Tao world was searching for, had unexpectedly entered reincarnation. Yi Xian. The corners of Mo Yuan's mouth lifted slightly and then gradually widened. Tao scripture. At this moment, Mo Yuan was very excited. He had never thought that by a freak combination of factors, he would actually discover the whereabouts of the Tao scripture. Actually, he had never thought that the prophet and Yi Xian would have any relationship. He had sent people down to investigate Yi Xian, because the people who returned said that Yi Xian was extremely talented and strong, and had already comprehended sword cognition. The demonic path families would not underestimate such a genius, so he had sent people down to investigate. But he had never thought that while investigating Yi Xian, he would find the prophet. It had to be said that this was a pleasant surprise. A great surprise. Mo Yuan laughed again. He was now at the self-release tier, beyond the great Tao, but there was no path in front of him. He did not think that he could walk a path, because since ancient times, how many super elites with extraordinary talent had died at the self-release tier? Didn't even Yi Lanting, who had stunned the entire Tao world, disappear? He had never thought that at this time, there would be the whereabouts of the Tao scripture. Could it be that the heavens were helping him? Haha. In the palace, Missouri Yuan's laughter floated. In the five-dimensional universe, Yi Xian and Big Sister had perfectly fused, and now he completely controlled all regulations. In a starry sky, Yi Xian stood quietly, and in his hand was the prison pagoda. Yi Xian looked at the prison pagoda in his hand and said with a smile, I want to see how strong the prison pagoda is after all the regulations are gathered. Big Sister said, wait until we meet an elite. Yi Xian was slightly puzzled. Why? Big Sister said, because the destructive power is too strong. Yi Xian, Big Sister said, with your current strength, if you can reach the shattering void tier, with Xiao Ta and your sword Dao, you can completely face a self-release tier elite. A head-on collision. Yi Xian took a deep breath. This was equivalent to being invincible in the fifth dimension. This was because there were no self-release realm experts in the entire fifth dimension. As if he had thought of something, Yi Xian suddenly asked, Big Sister, do you know the strength of a fifth dimension Tendo? Munyanyan. He was very, very curious about this woman's strength. After a moment of silence, eldest sister said, I don't know. I can only say that you must be careful of this woman. Yi Xian asked, why? The eldest sister said softly, because she is very dangerous. Fortunately, she doesn't seem to have any hostility towards you. Otherwise, you would have a headache. Yi Xian nodded. That's true. If Tendo became his enemy, he would definitely have a headache. This woman was too scary. Eldest sister continued, you can go find Guan Yin and the others, and have them help you reach the shattering void tier, preferably the returning element shattering realm tier. With your current foundation and foundation, once you reach the returning element shattering realm tier, your strength will be very strong. Probably even a half-step self-release tier elite won't be able to take your sword. Yi Xian was actually a bit freakish now because he was only in the ruler tier, but his battle prowess was stronger than an ordinary half-step self-release tier elite. If he activated his bloodline, even a half-step self-release tier elite wouldn't be his match. And if he reached the returning element shattering realm tier, he could definitely easily kill a half-step self-release tier elite. Now, Yi Xian's greatest weakness was that his cultivation level wasn't high enough. Yi Xian nodded. Yes, I have to increase my cultivation level. After saying so, he turned and left. The next moment, he appeared in Guan Yin's courtyard. The present him, as long as he wanted, could appear anywhere within a radius of several tens of thousands of miles. Space Dao. It could be said that he had truly utilized the Space Dao to its limits. As soon as he arrived at Guan Yin's courtyard, the door to Yi Xian's room suddenly opened, and then a woman walked out. It was Guan Yin. Guan Yin looked at Yi Xian. Is there something you need? Yi Xian nodded. Miss Guan, I would like to ask you to help me break through. Guan Yin fell silent for a moment and said, shattering the void. Yi Xian nodded. Guan Yin sized up Yi Xian and said, it shouldn't be difficult. Your foundation is too good, so it shouldn't be a problem. Yi Xian smiled and said, then I'll have to trouble you. Guan Yin nodded. Come with me. She turned and left after saying that. Yi Xian followed Guan Yin to a riverside. There were two old men standing in front of her, and they were both half-step self-release realm experts of the spirit of Yin race. They were the only two remaining half-step self-release realm experts of the spirit of Yin race. Guan Yin took out a black box and passed it to Yi Xian. Yi Xian opened the black box, and there was a pitch-black pill within it. Yi Xian looked at Guan Yin. What's this? Guan Yin said, a void advancement pill, a very precious thing. Yi Xian asked, can it be mass-produced? Guan Yin shook her head. It's very difficult. First, a void advancement pill requires a large amount of natural treasures. Secondly, a god-rank alchemist needs to spend at least 1 or 2 months to refine a single void advancement pill. Moreover, it isn't a 100% success rate, and there's a very high chance of failure. Yi Xian thought deeply for a moment, and then he said, let me introduce you to someone who refines pills. Guan Yin looked at Yi Xian. Someone who refines pills. Yi Xian smiled and said, that's right. As soon as he finished speaking, he called Xiao Linger over. Guan Yin looked at Xiao Linger. Yi Xian nodded. Guan Yin's expression was slightly strange. Xiao Linger glanced at the void advancement pill in Yi Xian's hand. Is it this one? Yi Xian nodded. Yes, can you refine it? Xiao Linger glanced at the pill again, and then she said, wait. As soon as she finished speaking, she returned to the prison pagoda. In next to no time, Xiao Linger started to get busy within the prison pagoda. Guan Yin looked at Yi Xian. Are you joking? Yi Xian smiled and said, do I look like I'm joking? Guan Yin hesitated for a moment, and then she said, we want to help you break through. Yi Xian was just about to speak when Xiao Linger suddenly appeared here. She opened her palm, and there were 2 pills there. Both of them were void advancement pills. The expressions of Guan Yin and the other 2 old men instantly changed when they witnessed this scene. Void advancement pills. Guan Yin hurriedly took the 2 pills. She sized them up for a moment, and then her expression became slightly solemn. They really are. As she spoke, she gazed at Xiao Linger, and her eyes were filled with disbelief. You were able to refine them in such a short period of time? Xiao Linger spoke indifferently, is it very difficult to refine them? Guan Yin was speechless. Xiao Linger gazed at Yi Xian. Is something the matter? Yi Xian smiled and said, can you help us refine more of these pills? Xiao Linger shook her head. I don't have enough materials. Meanwhile, Guan Yin suddenly said, we'll give you the materials. Xiao Linger gazed at Guan Yin. How many do you have? Guan Yin hesitated for a moment before she said, we can get a huge amount. Xiao Linger hurriedly shook her head. No, I want to refine my own pills. Guan Yin gazed at Yi Xian, and Yi Xian gazed at Xiao Linger. Xiao Linger puckered her lips and said, Big brother, these pills are trash. I don't want to spend too much time on these trash pills. Guan Yin was speechless. However, Yi Xian said excitedly, do you have better elixirs? Xiao Linger nodded. They do. As soon as she finished speaking, she opened her palm, and a pill appeared there. As soon as the pill appeared, a refreshing fragrance instantly filled the surroundings. The pill was only the size of a thumb, and it was completely crystalline. Moreover, it was covered in white light. It was obviously extraordinary. Yixian blinked and then asked, "What elixir is this?" Xiaolinger grinned. "It's called the marrow cleansing pill. It can change the flaws of a person's body and make their body more suitable for cultivation." As she spoke, she withdrew a book and looked through it. After that, she said, "It also says that if an ordinary person consumes this pill, then their body will undergo a huge change and become a superb physique for cultivation. A monster." Meanwhile, Guan Yin spoke abruptly. Yixian gazed at Guan Yin. Guan Yin spoke solemnly, "Our clan has such pills as well, and I've consumed many of them in the past. However, they're like the difference between the heavens and the earth when compared to the pill in her hand. In other words, if you have enough of these pills, you can cultivate a large number of super geniuses in the future." As she spoke, she looked at Yixian. In Spirit Region, newborn children like us from large clans and forces are born with a certain amount of talent. However, most of it depends on nurturing. Most of the time, the environment determines everything. Yixian fell silent. Environment determines everything. That was true. It was extremely difficult for an ordinary person to struggle to make a name for himself. However, for some people, their birth was the endpoint that others could never reach in their lifetime. Yixian withdrew his thoughts and looked at Xiaolinger. "Do you have any other pills?" Xiaolinger nodded. "Yes. I have many more. I've refined a lot of them." As soon as she finished speaking, she took out some more pills. Looking at the densely packed pills in Xiaolinger's hands, Yixian and the others were petrified. These pills were truly priceless, especially one called the Resurrection Pill. This pill was known as the Resurrection Pill. As long as one's soul was not completely destroyed, it could bring the dead back to life. Apart from that, there were other miscellaneous pills. Although they were messy, they were quite useful, especially the Golden Body Indestructible Pill. After consuming it, one could temporarily possess an invincible golden body, and one's physical body could shake the heavens and earth. Seeing so many pills, Yixian and the others were shocked. Especially Yixian. He knew that Xiaolinger was refining pills, but he didn't know that she had refined so many top-grade pills. This little girl was too capable. At this moment, Guan Yin suddenly said excitedly, "Give her to me." Yixian looked at Guan Yin. Guan Yin said excitedly, "With her, we can definitely cultivate many super experts." Yixian smiled, then looked at Xiaolinger. "Can you help me refine the pills?" Xiaolinger grinned. "Okay." Nothing could make her happier than being able to help Yixian. Xiaolinger looked at Guan Yin. "I need a lot of materials. Can you give them to me?" Guan Yin smiled. "Yes." Xiaolinger smiled. "Okay." Guan Yin looked at Yixian. "Swallow that pill. Then, I'll ask the two venerable elders to help you." Yixian nodded. He swallowed the pill. Soon, a wave of pure energy swept out from his body. Chapter 1200. Breakthrough. In the following time, Yixian began to break through to the shattering void tier under the guidance of the two Spirit of Darkness elites. And Xiaolinger followed Guan Yin to concoct pills. The entire fifth dimension was frantically searching for all kinds of supreme-grade natural treasures. Seeing the endless supply of natural treasures, Xiaolinger was overjoyed. When she was concocting pills in the prison tower, what she lacked the most were natural treasures. The people Yixian killed and the treasures he obtained were all taken by her. With the endless supply of natural treasures, Xiaolinger began to concoct medicinal pills like crazy. With the appearance of those medicinal pills, the number of elites in the fifth dimension increased. The entire population improved. Now, no forces were hiding anything, and were all helping those with talent and potential improve. Of course, they didn't help just anyone. The first to help were their own people, in other words, those who joined the Fifth Dimension Alliance. Tendo's pawn shop. Two women sat in the hall, Xiao Dao and the one-legged woman. Xiao Dao looked at the one-legged woman. "You can also break through." The one-legged woman nodded. "I know." Xiao Dao said softly, "I've already told Guan Yin. You can go find her yourself later. She will arrange everything." The one-legged woman suddenly asked, "Can we really resist the fifth dimension tribulation?" Xiao Dao shook her head. "I don't know." The one-legged woman was silent. Xiao Dao smiled. "Just do your best." The one-legged woman nodded, stood up, and left. She was the target of intensive training, which was also appointed by Yi Xian. It could be said that the power of the fifth dimension would be gathered to train her, Arrow, and Lancio, and the others, because they were truly outstanding enough. After the one-legged woman left, Xiao Dao raised her head, and there was a trace of worry in her eyes. Tendo had disappeared. These few days she had been trying to contact Tendo, but that woman seemed to have vanished from the world, without a trace. She had a bad premonition. Moreover, that feeling was getting stronger and stronger. After a while, Xiao Dao stood up and left. She still decided to look for Tendo. There must be a reason for this woman's disappearance. If she didn't figure it out, she wouldn't feel at ease. By the river, Yi Xian sat cross-legged on the ground, exuding an extremely powerful aura. Beside him were the two spirits of 9 Yin. They were in charge of guiding Yi Xian during this period of time. At this moment, both of them had mixed feelings. Not long ago, the spirits of 9 Yin and Yi Xian were still fighting to the death. But now, both sides had no choice but to cooperate. At this moment, Yi Xian suddenly opened his eyes. A powerful aura emanated from him, causing the surrounding space to tremble. The two old men looked at each other, and their eyes were filled with shock. He broke through just like that? Yi Xian took a deep breath. He stretched out his right hand, and the space in front of him immediately became illusory. Shattering Void Tier. He was now in the Shattering Void Tier, and it could be said that this was the easiest time for him to break through. The main reason why he broke through so quickly was that he once used Sword Domain to reach the state of Shattering Void Tier. It could be said that although he wasn't in the Shattering Void Tier before, he could use Sword Domain to reach the Shattering Void Tier to create Shattering Void Tier. It was precisely because of this that he was so relaxed when breaking through to the Shattering Void Tier. The two old men behind Yi Xian didn't know this. When they saw that Yi Xian really broke through, the shock in their hearts could be said to be extreme. How long had it been? Less than a day, right? He broke through to the Shattering Void Tier. Was it so abnormal? Yi Xian turned to look at the two old men who were still shocked, and said with a smile, "Seniors, thank you." One of the old men hurriedly said, "Not at all. Young Master Yi is a genius. Even without the two of us, he could easily break through." Yi Xian smiled and said, "You can call me Yi Xian or Little Friend Yi. I don't really like the two words Young Master Yi." The old man nodded. "All right." Yi Xian looked around and then said, "Seniors, please go ahead." The two nodded slightly and then took their leave. After the two left, Yi Xian's figure trembled and directly appeared in a starry sky. He slowly closed his eyes, and his divine sense spread out like a net. Soon, the whole starry sky was covered by his divine sense. In the next moment, he directly disappeared, and when he reappeared, he was already tens of thousands of miles away. Not far in front of him was Xiao Dao. Xiao Dao looked at Yi Xian. "You also came to find her?" Yi Xian nodded. "When she left, she told me it was very dangerous, very dangerous. I don't know what danger she was talking about." Xiao Dao looked up into the starry sky and spoke softly. "She probably noticed something." Yi Xian nodded. "That woman, can't she speak clearly?" Xiao Dao looked at Yi Xian. "My intuition tells me that it might be related to my clan." Yi Xian frowned slightly. "A clan of the Demon Dao?" Xiao Dao nodded. Yi Xian spoke in a low voice. "Miss Xiao Dao, can you tell me about your Demon Dao clan?" Xiao Dao nodded slightly. The Demon Dao clan is an extraordinary clan in the Dao world. The reason the Demon Dao clan is able to become an overlord in the Dao world is mainly because of our bloodline. The power of our bloodline allows us to stand out from the masses, especially when it comes to cultivation. We're blessed by nature, and it's more than 10 times easier than ordinary people. Moreover, we're born with a special bloodline just like yours. As she spoke, she shook her head. However, our success is due to the power of our bloodline, And our downfall is also due to the power of our bloodline. Yi Xian was slightly puzzled. Why? Xiao Dao glanced at Yi Xian. Because very few of us are able to surpass our ancestors and reverse our bloodline. If we can't reverse our bloodline, then it will become our shackles. So, the power of our bloodline has its pros and cons. Yi Xian spoke in a low voice. According to what you're saying, isn't it very difficult for my bloodline to break through? Xiao Dao spoke indifferently. What do you think? Yi Xian hesitated for a moment, and then he said, I think it's slightly difficult. Xiao Dao looked at Yi Xian. It's very difficult. Your bloodline is extremely abnormal, and the increase in your combat strength is simply indescribable. Moreover, the source of your bloodline seems to still be alive. In other words, if it doesn't die, then there's no end to the growth of your bloodline. So, it'll be even more difficult for you to break through. Understand? Yi Xian smiled. Why would I break through it? Wouldn't it be a good thing for me if it becomes stronger? Xiao Dao shook her head. You're really ambitious. Yi Xian smiled and said, Miss Xiao Dao, can you tell me why you're here? Xiao Dao fell silent for a moment before she said, because our bloodline is special, so the women of our Devil Dao clans can't marry an ordinary person. Because in the eyes of our clans, that would taint our Devil Dao clan's bloodline. So, if we want to get married, then we have to find someone whose bloodline isn't weaker than ours. Yi Xian spoke in a low voice. Your Devil Dao clan found someone for you, but you didn't like him, right? Xiao Dao nodded. He's a playboy and he has more women than you do. Yi Xian was astounded. Big sister, can you explain it more clearly? What do you mean by more than me? I, Yi Xian, don't have many women, right? Xiao Dao looked at Yi Xian. You're trying to say that those women by your side are your friends, right? Yi Xian hurriedly said, There's nothing going on between me and them. Xiao Dao's face was expressionless. The best scum among scum. A scum. Yi Xian was speechless. Xiao Dao continued. Because I didn't agree to it, so I ran away and used some special methods to escape to this place. Yi Xian spoke in a low voice. The Devil Dao clan didn't look for you? Xiao Dao spoke indifferently. They definitely did. But they never expected that I would escape to this place. But now they know. As she spoke, she looked at Yi Xian. The problem isn't me, but you. Yi Xian frowned slightly. You mean, they might come to find trouble with me? Xiao Dao nodded. I'm afraid that they also want your study room. Yi Xian was puzzled. This study room is from the 5th dimension. It can only resist 5th dimension tribulations. The Devil Dao clan isn't from the 5th dimension. Why would they want this study room? It doesn't make sense. Xiao Dao spoke in a low voice. What do they want? Have you ever thought about where this study room came from? It must have come from above. What I'm most worried about now is that this study room isn't something ordinary. If that's the case, then congratulations. Although you haven't left the 5th dimension, your enemies are from all over the heavens and the earth. Yi Xian was speechless. Xiao Dao sighed. Take care of yourself. As she spoke, she turned and left. Yi Xian raised his head and looked at the starry sky. After a moment, he shook his head and smiled. Enemies outside the starry sky. I'm really capable. As he spoke, he turned and left. To him, he didn't care at all. In any case, he had no lack of enemies. The most important thing to him now was to nurture the people around him. After the 5th dimension and spirit realm merged, the strength of the 5th dimension wasn't weak at all. However, it could still be stronger. If gods came, they would kill gods. If demons came, they would slay demons. Somewhere in the starry sky, a phantom floated in the starry sky. Behind him, there were two people. One was dressed in white, and the other was dressed in black. Both of them were experts from the Devil Dao clan. Moreover, they were both at the self-release realm. The three of them floated in the starry sky, not in a hurry or slow. At this moment, the phantom suddenly said, The two of you, our clansmen, have instructed us to capture the plain-dressed woman alive. We must not harm her life. I hope the two of you will remember this. The person in white said in a low voice, The two of us only know how to kill people. The phantom said in a low voice. The two of you, this woman is extremely important to the patriarch. I hope the two of you can consider the bigger picture. The person in white looked at the phantom. What's the strength of that woman? The phantom said, according to our investigation, she should be at the self-release realm. The person in white slowly closed her eyes. Self-release realm. I hope she isn't too weak. Otherwise, it would be too boring. The two of them hadn't fought for many years. Chapter 1201. In the depths of the distant starry sky, the starry sky was boundless. A person standing in the starry sky was as small as a speck of dust. At the end of the starry sky, a plain dress fluttered in the starry sky. In this vast starry sky, the woman seemed somewhat frail and lonely. The woman walked very slowly, as if she was taking a stroll. After a long time, the woman suddenly took out a small wooden figure. This small wooden figure looked exactly like Yixian. Looking at the small wooden figure in her hand, the woman's lips curled up. As if thinking of something, she suddenly looked at the end of the starry sky. At this moment, the smile on her face gradually became cold. I am not dead, so who can harm you? Who dares to harm you? In the past, she was only alive because of her brother's words. If you have the ability, then protect the common people of this world. She did it. She protected that part of the universe for tens of thousands of years. And now, she was alive because her brother was still alive. In fact, after that epiphany, she felt that living was meaningless. Soar Dao? She was already at the peak. Longevity? If she did not want to die, who could make her die? If she died one day, there was only one explanation. There was only one explanation, and that was that she wanted to die. But now, she did not want to die. At this moment, the starry sky in the distance suddenly trembled. Soon, 3 people appeared in front of her. They were the mysterious expert from the demonic path family and the black and white envoys. All 3 of them were at the self-release realm. The plain-dressed woman collected her thoughts and looked at the 3 people in front of her. I only have one question. Who told you to find me? The figure smiled and said, I heard from the 5th dimension's Tendo that you are Yi Xian's little sister. The 5th dimension's Tendo. The plain-dressed woman turned her head and glanced down. Somewhere in the starry sky, a woman who was roasting fish suddenly raised her head. The next moment, she quickly turned and ran. I did not do anything, I did not do anything. As she spoke, she had already run back to the 5th dimension. She knew that if she was in the 5th dimension, that woman would not attack. Because this attack might even kill Yixian. When that woman had killing intent, the place where Yixian was the safest. The plain-dressed woman did not attack. The 5th dimension might not be able to withstand her sword, but Yixian might not be able to either. Moreover, there were many friends and relatives of Yixian in the 5th dimension. She didn't care, but she cared about Yixian's concern. Love me, love my dog. She didn't want him to be unhappy at all. The plain-dressed woman retracted her gaze. The moment she retracted her gaze, the Tendo in the 5th dimension heaved a sigh of relief. The 5th dimension Tendo raised his head to look at the starry sky and clicked his tongue. So strong. The strength. I can only describe it as F*King Hell. As she spoke, she seemed to think of something and said, this demon path family really went to find her. As she spoke to hear, she suddenly raised a thumb. The demonic path families really have guts. The demon Dao family. In the starry skies, there was a plain-dressed woman. The phantom smiled and said, Miss, we would like to invite you to our demonic path family as a guest. Is that possible? The plainly dressed woman looked at the phantom. Sure. The phantom was slightly taken aback. He agreed just like that? Wasn't he going to fight? The phantom looked at the plain-dressed woman and quickly understood. It was probably because the other party saw that he had 3 self-release realm experts on his side, so he gave up resisting. But this was also good. It saved him some trouble. The phantom calmly said, Please. As she finished speaking, she turned around and left with the black and white emissaries. Yixian followed them. On the way, the The phantom looked at the plain-dressed woman. The plain-dressed woman's expression was calm. He couldn't see whether she was happy or angry. The phantom smiled and said, "Your Excellency, aren't you going to ask why we are inviting you?" The plain-dressed woman looked at the phantom and didn't say anything. The phantom suddenly transmitted his Xian Qi to the black and white emissaries. "Can the two of you feel her true strength?" After a moment of silence, the white emissary suddenly said, "I can't feel it. This person has no aura." Hearing this, the white emissary's expression gradually sank. At this time, the black emissary suddenly said, "Presumably, she has some secret method to hide her aura." The phantom nodded. The three of them couldn't feel the aura of the plain-dressed woman. There were only two possibilities. The first was that the plain-dressed woman had some secret method to hide her aura from them. The second was that the plain-dressed woman's strength far surpassed them. They couldn't feel the suppression of their realms. It was obviously the first. Above self-release realm? Even Yi Lanting of the Dao world hadn't reached that level all those years ago. In his opinion, it was absolutely impossible for her to reach above self-release realm, because there was no one above self-release realm in the entire Dao world. Self-release realm was the limit. At this time, the white emissary suddenly said, "This woman doesn't give me a simple feeling. We can't be careless." The black emissary smiled and said, "She really isn't simple. She can still be so calm when facing three self-release realm experts. I have to say that such determination is really rare. However, so what if she isn't simple? Can she fight against the three of us by herself? 1 against 3? The phantom and the white emissary shook their heads. Even though there were strong and weak self-release realm experts, and there were those who could fight 1 against 3, it was very rare. Those people were geniuses amongst geniuses, monstrous geniuses amongst monstrous geniuses. To put it simply, it was basically impossible to fight 1 against 3. As if thinking of something, the phantom glanced at the plain-dressed woman. The plain-dressed woman's expression was still calm, without the slightest ripple in her eyes. The phantom smiled faintly. "Miss is a smart person." His meaning was very simple. The plain-dressed woman not resisting was a very wise decision. The plain-dressed woman still didn't speak. Soon, the few of them saw a grand hall. Demonic Dao Hall. Even though the demonic Dao family clans weren't the top faction in the Dao world, they were considered a super first-rate faction and had a very great influence in the entire Dao world. Especially now, the demonic Dao family clans planned to form a marriage alliance with an emperor clan. This emperor clan was the #1 Daoist clan. Once the demonic Dao family clans formed a marriage alliance with an emperor clan, the demonic Dao family's status in the Dao world would rise once again. Soon, the phantom and the other two brought the plain-dressed woman into the demonic Dao hall. Inside the hall, there was only Mo Yuan. Mo Yuan looked at the plain-dressed woman. "All of you withdraw." The phantom and the other two quietly withdrew. Soon, the entire demonic Dao hall was sealed off. Mo Yuan looked at the plain-dressed woman and said with a smile, "I heard that your brother and my demonic Dao family's eldest daughter are already married. Moreover, the fifth dimension's Tendo also said that if we are dissatisfied with this marriage, we can come to you. You will give us a very, very reasonable explanation. Now, I can tell you that my demonic Dao family is very dissatisfied with this marriage. Can you give me a very, very reasonable explanation?" The plain-dressed woman looked at Mo Yuan. "You want an explanation?" Mo Yuan smiled. "Yes." The plain-dressed woman took a step forward. When she took that step, a wisp of sword light suddenly appeared in front of Mo Yuan. 1 step and 1 sword. Mo Yuan narrowed his eyes. He hadn't expected that the plain-dressed woman would make a move. However, he didn't panic at all. This was because he was confident. However, when that wisp of sword light appeared in front of him, his expression changed. What kind of sword was this? Just as he was about to make a move, he discovered that the sword had already pierced through him. Between his eyebrows, Mo Yuan was stunned. His eyes were filled with disbelief. What was going on? How could he have been pierced by this sword? This was impossible. Mo Yuan looked at the plain-dressed woman and said with a trembling voice, "You?" The plain-dressed woman looked at Mo Yuan. "That is my explanation. One step and one sword and one death." Mo Yuan panicked. "You?" At this moment he was truly panicking. It should be fear. He was a peak self-release realm powerhouse. In the entire Dao world, no one could kill him in one move. No one. But this woman in front of him had done it. Moreover, that sword did not even give him a chance to fight back. What kind of strength was this? Above self-release realm. This woman in front of him was above self-release realm. At this moment, Mo Yuan was truly shocked to the extreme. Heavens, he had actually encountered a powerhouse above self-release realm. However, the other party came from the lower realm. How did she reach above self-release realm? As if he thought of something, Mo Yuan suddenly looked at the plain-dressed woman. You obtained the Dao scripture. You obtained the Dao scripture. You broke through to above self-release realm because of the Dao scripture." The plain-dressed woman did not speak. Mo Yuan was already somewhat deranged. The Great Dao's 50 Heavenly Evolutions, 49 Mortal Release Realm. You have read the Dao scripture. You have read the Dao scripture? The plain-dressed woman suddenly turned and left. At this moment, Mo Yuan stared at the plain-dressed woman. "Did you break through to above self-release realm because of the Dao scripture? Is it?" The plain-dressed woman stopped and turned to look at Mo Yuan. "No." Mo Yuan roared. His eyes were about to pop out of their sockets. "Impossible. Without the Dao scripture, how could you reach above self-release realm? This is absolutely impossible." The plain-dressed woman was expressionless. "You are so stupid." After saying that, she turned and left. Mo Yuan. At this moment, the black and white envoys and that phantom suddenly appeared in front of the plain-dressed woman. At this moment, the three of them were somewhat stunned. What was going on? Why was their family head about to die? At this moment, Mo Yuan quickly roared. "Let her go! Let her go!" The three of them looked at each other. At this moment, the plain-dressed woman suddenly said, "I will not leave for now." Mo Yuan looked at the plain-dressed woman. The plain-dressed woman looked back at Mo Yuan. "It was you who asked me to come." After saying that, she pointed a finger at the three of them. A ray of sword light appeared. The moment they saw this strand of sword light, the faces of the three people changed dramatically. They wanted to resist, but just as they had this thought in their minds, their heads had already flown off. The three of them were instantly killed. One sword strike killed 3 self-release realms. Seeing this scene, Mo Yuan in the distance was petrified. This sword strike instantly killed 3 self-release realms. Mo Yuan's mind went blank. As for the three of them, their eyes were filled with disbelief. They had died just like that? Especially the phantom. At this moment, he was completely dumbfounded. What did he just invite back? Mo Yuan looked at the plain-dressed woman and said with a trembling voice, "Leave. Please. I beg you." The plain-dressed woman shook her head. "I'm not leaving." Hearing this, Mo Yuan's expression instantly became fierce. "I invite the ancestor." Summon the ancestor. Bang. A powerful aura suddenly rushed into the sky from the demonic path hall. P.S. May everything be well. You're tuning in to the Wang Lin's Journey YouTube channel. Don't forget to subscribe and join us on this journey to catch the most captivating stories.